Thank you, Chair. I've just spoken to Councillor Powell, and he's having trouble with his broadband, and he's just having to restart his router and reconnect. So we can expect him shortly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, with your permission, I'll let you know who's in the meeting.
Thank you.
Members in attendance are Councillors Armitage, Barry, Cooper, Elliott, Foster, Liggett, Potts, Ridgway, Rouse, Ruff, and we're expecting Councillor Powell momentarily. We also have in the meeting room Jim Fieldsend from our legal team, members of the governance team and the ICT team who are supporting this meeting, and Phil and Adrian from the planning team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. As you know, we have a protocol in place for meeting in this virtual way, which I would now like the meeting facilitator to read out.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you're in receipt of the etiquette that we use for all of our virtual meetings. So some of the key points for this meeting, if you could dress and behave as if you would do if you were physically within the council chamber. Please be aware that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Ask for you to speak through the chair, remaining muted when not invited to speak. If you do wish to speak, a simple raise of a hand should suffice and the chair should see you. If she does not, you can write speak within the chat bar. I will also have closed captions on, and I'll be able to indicate if I've seen that you've indicated to speak, and I will try to communicate that to the chair also. When you're speaking, if the first time you do, if you would be kind enough to introduce yourself, for example, Councillor X representing Y Ward, will be conducting voting by roll call on each application today. Please just be mindful of your home surroundings and appear alone on camera, and to keep yourselves on camera if you're a member of the committee at all times. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the first item on the agenda. It's apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillors Carol Huckabee and Tracy Reader, and as I mentioned in the roll call, Councillor Heather Liggett is substituting today for Councillor Huckabee.
Thank you. Are there any other apologies from anybody? No. Okay. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disposable pecuniary interest and/or other interests not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Have we received any declarations of interest?
None received prior to the meeting, Chair.
Do members have any declaration of interest? No, thank you.
Received.
Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. We now have the minutes of our meeting held on Tuesday, the 16th of March 2020. Are we happy that they are a correct record? And if so, is there a mover?
Move them, Chair.
Oh, my goodness me. A seconder? Thank you, Councillors Armitage and Elliott. All those in favour, please show their hands.
I think that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That motion's been carried. The planning, now we'll move on to the planning applications. Main business, as you can see, we have 2 applications, each of which is own report marked as items 4 and 5. I'm happy with this and intend to consider them in that order. We will also be asked to consider 2 provisional TPO preservation orders. These are marked as items 7 and 8. Again, I'm happy to take them in that order. However, before we do this, I would like the clerk to explain for the benefit of members, speakers and the public who are watching on YouTube how they will be dealt with.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the procedure for considering the applications and provisional TPOs at the meeting. We will consider the 2 applications and the 2 provisional TPOs in the order that they are set out on the agenda. The Chair will introduce the application or order, then ask the planning officers to refer members to any late comments or updates received since the agenda was issued. The late items agenda supplement has been published on the Council's website, and the link has been sent to members of the committee. The planning officers will then give a brief presentation setting out the application plans and photographs from the site. The screen showing this presentation will be shared with those attending the meeting. They can also be seen on the Council's website through its YouTube channel. Following on from this, the Chair will ask each of the speakers, any ward members first, followed by objectors, then the applicant or their agent, to speak to the committee. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to put forward their views using the conferencing facility. The speakers on the provisional TPOs will also have 3 minutes to speak. There will be a reminder given by the clerk when 30 seconds remain. At the end of the speaker's 3 minutes, members of the committee will have an opportunity to ask the speaker questions, if necessary, to clarify any points they have made. When we have heard from all the speakers on an application or an order, the Chair will open up the meeting for debate by the committee and determination by a vote. A note for the speakers. Once the application or order you have come to speak on has been dealt with, you may leave the virtual meeting room. If you choose to remain, then please mute your microphone and turn off your camera. You will not be allowed to participate further in the meeting from that point. As you are aware, this meeting is being live streamed. The Council will make a recording for purposes of preparing the minutes. Once the minutes have been approved by the committee, then this recording will be deleted. Please note, however, that others may also record the live stream from the internet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll move on to the first application, and in line with normal practice, I'm going to ask the planning officers to tell us about any late comments, reports that they have been produced, and for the planning manager to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. The meeting facilitator will share the presentation on screen. This means that I might find it difficult to see everyone. Therefore, I will allow the officers to complete their presentation, and I ask members to reserve any points of order or questions about the process until the end. There'll be plenty of time for you to ask your questions later. I'm now going to invite the speaker. Oh no, sorry, I'm ahead of myself. We'll go to the planning officers, and the first plan is for application is for Kilmarsh, which is NED/20/00919/FL. And I believe Phil Slater, you're going to do it today?
That's right, Chair, and thank you, Chair. I'd firstly like to refer members to the late comments report and the comments that we received from the NHS with regards to the Section 106 contributions. As set out in the report, the proposal is for 50 dwellings, including 7 bungalows proposed as affordable housing, along with a commuted sum for 3 off-site affordable units. If we could have the first slide, please, Nikki. Thank you. This slide is an aerial photograph of the site and shows Primrose Lane to the south. The route of the Chesterfield Canal is along the western site boundary, and to the northeast is the existing industrial estate. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. This site shows the red line application site boundary, and at the top of the slide you can see the proposed newt mitigation area, which is referred to in the committee report. Have the next slide, please. This slide shows proposed layout and the new access road into the site. The layout proposes a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bed units with on-plot parking. The 7 bungalows as affordable housing are located at the site entrance. The development is generally outward facing to provide views over the canal route and also at the northern end. Could I have the next slide, please? This slide shows the proposed access into the site. Have the next slide, please. Thank you. This is a visual which shows the site layout and also images of the proposed houses that would overlook the canal route and also the open space. This is a visual, again, looking from the open space back towards the houses. Okay. That's again some more visuals of the proposed units. The bottom one is of the units that are overlooking the proposed canal route. These are photos that were submitted by the agent and show the western boundary with the proposed canal route. Again, photos from the agent looking back towards Primrose Lane. This is a photo of the proposed access into the site. It's a photo showing the existing properties on Primrose Lane. Photo again of the site entrance. It's a photo looking back from the site entrance towards Primrose Lane. It's a photo that shows the proposed boundary with the canal. That area in the foreground is where the proposed open space is located. This is a view looking into the application site. Again, on the left-hand side, you can see the boundary with where the proposed canal route would be. It's a site, another photo from within the application site. The photo from within the application site. That's a photo at the northern. Sorry, that's a photo of the northern end of the site, with on the other side of the hedge is the proposed canal route. Photo looking back towards Primrose Lane. The area next to the house in the background is where the proposed open space is located. On the right-hand side is where the canal route would be. That's another photo, but further back into the site. Again, similar photo from another angle. It's a photo from the access onto Primrose Lane, looking down the hill. Photo from the existing junction, again looking up the hill. These next few photos are going to show the existing parking arrangements along Primrose Lane. Photo back towards the junction. The next slide, please. That shows the site access, yeah. That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, if I may just at this point, just to confirm to members that Mr. Grisona is down to speak in the pack. Mr. Grisona can't be with us this afternoon, but just to inform members that what he was to say has been included in the update report that members have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for that. I'm now going to invite the speakers to speak. As the clerk has explained, they will each have 3 minutes to get over their points. They will be informed when 30 seconds remain. As members, you can ask them to clarify any matters that have been raised, but remember, your questions should only relate to the points which they have already made. If the technology fails us, we have asked them to send us in advance a written statement of their comments. Those that we have received have been included in the agenda supplement. Thank you. I believe I have the ward member down to speak on this, Councillor Steve Clough.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
3 minutes, Steve.
Okay, right, okay, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of residents regarding the latest planning application submitted at the end of September, proposing to build 50 houses on the land north of Primrose Lane. A significant number of residents have highlighted their concerns regarding this proposal. They are aware that permissions have already been granted in 2017 for 30 houses, and although remain of the view that this was not the right decision, they acknowledge that this permission has been given in principle. Residents, however, are deeply troubled by the proposed densification of the site and that it is not appropriate for the proposed number of homes. Bluntly, 30 was bad enough, but now residents are being asked to take 50 on a relatively small road and accessed by a junction on the brow of a hill, which is just not appropriate for the additional traffic movements. From mine and other Killamarsh councillors' conversations with residents, it is clear that the majority opinion is that the scale of the new application is significant and, in their view, unacceptable, as it is almost double the amount of new homes on a greenfield site and is not in line with the draft local plan that proposed only 30. The additional homes with additional parking for an extra 158 vehicles will place a significant strain on the infrastructure of the village beyond that is already being asked to do. Killamarsh already experienced significant traffic problems during rush hour, and the additional cars use would result from additional 20 homes would make it even harder for residents to travel in and out of the village, and local roads would struggle to take this increase. As I have said, the junction is simply not appropriate for this level of additional traffic, with many residents noting that the proposed access to the site will be detrimental to the free and safe flow of traffic both on Primrose Lane and the adjoining Sheffield Road, contrary to policies T2 and H12 of the North East Derbyshire local plan. Primrose Lane already experienced issues regarding parking, especially in the mornings and the early afternoons due to two nearby schools. There are times when vehicles are unable to traverse through the road due to parked cars and large vehicles of a large number of HGVs that the development
30 seconds remain.
would likely to be unable to pass due to huge blockages from local residents. It is clear from the numerous conversations with residents that the road network does not have the capacity to cope with the increase in properties. For all those reasons, and simply because this represents an unnecessary and unplanned densification of the site, I would ask the committee to reject the application today.
Thank you. Do I have any questions? Oh, you seem to have got off lightly.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And the next speaker I have down is Elizabeth Jean Cookson.
Thank you, Chair.
You have 3 minutes.
The width and layout of Primrose Lane and its junction with Sheffield Road has not changed for decades. When Primrose Close was planned in the mid-1980s, Primrose Lane was considered not wide enough for traffic for 28 properties with 1 to 2 vehicles each. So the plans were reduced to 14 properties, which are on Primrose Close. The 2014 application was originally for 40 properties and was only passed at the third attempt for 30 properties by 1 vote, I believe. If the lane could not cope with extra vehicles in the 1980s and the later application was reduced to 30, where is the logic to say it can now cope with traffic for 50 properties with approximately 2 to 4 vehicles each property? The 50 properties in the proposed development are more than the current total of 39. The estimated additional 130 to 160 vehicles would more than double the number of vehicles likely to use the lane to access Sheffield Road, without counting the increasing number of delivery, service and school-related vehicles. The site visit on 16th of September 2020 was at the quietest time of the day, so the information is factually incorrect. The visit should have been between 8 and 9 a.m. or 2:45 and 3:45 p.m. when the situation would have been very different due to the number of vehicles accessing the lane for drop-off or collection of school children. Pictures were included with my letter of the 13th of November 2020. These vehicles often park dangerously, and there have been many vehicle collisions either at the junction of Sheffield Road or with the Close. These incidents are not included in the official statistics. Some current residents do not have any off-road parking, and so they have to park on the road or partly on the pavement to allow space for vehicles to try and pass them. The trip generation data used in the application for the 30 to 50 units in the proposed estate may be accurate for journeys within that estate. It does not take account of all other vehicle journeys onto or off of the estate to Primrose Lane and the close, and going on to Sheffield Road, or the proximity of the schools.
30 seconds remain.
What would the actual data look like if it was for all 89 properties, so 50 plus the existing 39, plus non-resident vehicle trips? The transport statement suggests that the worst case scenario is 26 to 27 two-way movements each day, but only within the estate. The worst case scenario already exists, gridlock twice a day, as detailed in my letter of the 13th of November, mainly with school-related vehicles onto and off of Primrose Lane.
That's time, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions? No. Thank you. The next speaker I have down is Claire Nundy.
Thank you, Chair.
3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. The unanimous complaint of all the residents is the issue of access to this development. It's our understanding that under the Killamarsh Norwood Extension Policy, E3, as acknowledged by Red Mile on page 21 of their planning statement, the original approved entrance to this development site was by the way of Bailey Drive. This route would exit onto Rotherham Road, which is a much safer and easier access onto the main highway system, and would not have any disrupted effect on any residents. Our previous objections to the strata home development were totally ignored, and now it seems that you can see no problem with increasing the number of houses to 50. So can someone please explain why Primrose Lane is the better option? We can only assume that it would cost more to develop the road from Bailey Drive and therefore reduce the developer's profit. We note from the correspondence that numerous discussions have taken place between the Planning Department, Highways Agency and Red Mile, but contrary to what the developer says, no one has approached the residents to discuss our concerns, especially the Highways Agency. We are the ones experiencing existing daily traffic problems, which you'll not find in paper statistics and guidance notes. Why were we not included in these discussions? Doesn't our opinion count? On the other hand, the developer in their planning statement can produce unchallenged statements, such as the residents of Primrose Lane will not be unduly affected by the proposal. Surely up to 158 extra vehicles using a narrow Primrose Lane will have a major effect on residents, not to mention months of disruption from site traffic. There's no conflict between the development and those properties located along the unadopted part of Primrose Lane. Try telling that to the residents who will be unable to park their cars outside their homes. Surely you can't just plan to use part of the unadopted road without consulting with the appropriate homeowners. It's considered that safe and suitable access can be achieved for all users of the site, and the level of activity will not result in any significant impact on the local highway network. At peak times, it's already chaotic at the junction of Primrose Lane and Sheffield Road with residents' vehicles, but more so with non-resident vehicles.
30 seconds remain.
And the addition of a further 53 two-way movements would only exacerbate the situation. In the last 6 months, there's been 3 recorded accidents on Sheffield Road between the brow of Lock Hill and top side of the school crossing to the east. In conclusion, it's mine and the other residents' considered opinion that Primrose Lane cannot sustain this proposed development.
That's time, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you. And the next speaker I have down is Julie Bennett.
Hello.
You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
I and the residents object to the application on the grounds that it will be detrimental to the free and safe flow of traffic, both on Primrose Lane and Sheffield Road. Sheffield Road is a main highway through Killamarsh carrying ever-expanding volumes of traffic, which is getting worse with increasing numbers using this route to visit the new Gulliver's World Adventure Park. The increase in traffic, including more and more HGV vehicles, is regularly causing problems whenever any form of road obstruction occurs, to the extent that queues are quickly formed, especially at peak times. Primrose Lane joins Sheffield Road 150 yards from the infant and junior schools to the east and adjacent to the brow of Lock Hill to the west. The lane is half made up with footpaths on either side, and the other side is unadopted. Both are narrow, made worse with parked cars. At peak times, there are already many problems at this junction, including danger exiting onto Sheffield Road due to the closeness of Lock Hill, made worse when vehicles are parked up and over the brow, creating a blind spot. Road blockages due to the narrowness of the lane and the number of parked non-resident vehicles. Blockages creating tailbacks east and west of Sheffield Road when vehicles are unable to enter the lane from left to right due to cars trying to exit the lane at the same time. One-way traffic created outside the two schools when cars are parked on Sheffield Road, which again causes tailbacks both east and west. Pedestrians, especially young children, manoeuvring between the cars, entering and leaving the lane. This application is a major development with provision for 158 vehicles, generating 53 additional two-way movements at peak times, which will obviously exacerbate the existing problems. By the same token, the addition of work vehicles joining the existing chaos at the junction with Sheffield Road will seriously affect the traffic flow through Killamarsh. It's our understanding that the Highways Agency should check this application conforms with policies T2 and H12 by looking at the existing situation and what impact the number of additional vehicles emanating from this development would have on the adjoining road network. You would naturally assume that this would be done at peak times, but the survey was carried out at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, the quietest time of day. In addition, it was during COVID lockdown, when there was very little traffic on the roads. As a result, the surveyors apparently have no objections. They have made this decision having not witnessed the escalating problems that the residents experience on a regular basis, which surely
30 seconds remain.
And therefore a fresh survey should be carried out. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you. The next speaker I have on my list is the planning consultant, Michael Edgar. Mr. Edgar, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Edgar from DLP Planning, and we are the planning consultants for the application. As you've heard, the principle of residential development is well established, it being a housing allocation and it previously being granted planning permission. And to be clear, the increased number of dwellings on site is a result of the Health and Safety Executive revising their exemption zones of major hazards, which is related to the industrial area to the north. It's not to do with highway capacity. The 30 dwelling capacity referred to in the draft local plan is predicated on the previous planning permission, hence that being taken forward. We've subsequently made representations to the local plan under references 10394 and 10397 to clarify that site allocation KL3 should be amended to reflect this current application for 50 dwellings. We agree with your officers that a density of 13 dwellings per hectare, which is what you would have at 30 dwellings on this site, would be inefficient. 50 dwellings would be obviously a greater density and a more efficient use of land, which is in accordance with national planning policy in respect to making efficient use of land, but also your draft policy SD12 that seeks to optimize housing densities, particularly in sustainable locations and in areas with high frequency public transport. A number of people have mentioned issues around the highways matters. The County Highways Authority have raised no objection. And to clarify, the technical assessments undertaken, the site visit referred to, this was not a site visit to undertake traffic counts. This was a site visit for the highways consultants to familiarise themselves with the surroundings. The actual calculations on trip generation is done from the TRIX database. Now, that is an industry-wide standard database for calculating likely traffic. It's a modelling tool, so it's not affected by changes in travel patterns as a result of COVID-19 lockdowns and things along those lines. To summarise some of the benefits of the development, then, we think this is an efficient residential development on an allocated housing site There'll be a mix of housing provided, 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties. There will be bungalows included. Chesterfield Canal Trust have been engaged throughout the process and have commented on it being an appropriate response to the canal route frontage.
30 seconds remain.
There will be a safe access provided. 20% affordable housing provision will be made with a combination of 7 affordable houses as bungalows on site and a financial contribution topping up the remainder, as will off-site play provision and maintenance. So I summarise by saying we welcome the recommendation and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Could I just ask one question of you? The 2-bedroom properties, are they all bungalows?
Oh, that's a good question. I believe they may be. Just double checking now and trying to find a schedule of accommodation. Yes, they are.
Thank you. So I'm just a bit concerned. We had nice pictures of all the large properties, but there's nothing regarding the smaller ones. I just wondered what they would appear like.
Bungalows indeed, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Shipman, then Councillor Potts.
Cheers, Chair. Hi, Michael. I wondered if you could just clarify, you know, how you're saying that some rules have changed, so now you're able to build more houses. Is that because the buffer zone from the actual source of the dangerous, whatever it is, chemical substances, whatever, is reduced, and therefore you can build further closer to it? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, it's slightly different than that. It's actually the number of houses that you can have within different zones, and it's the Health and Safety Executive have reviewed their legislation in that regard and their guidance. So they've changed the number of houses you can have in an area at risk, but they have also reviewed the boundary area as well, which is much reduced it.
Thank you.
Councillor Potts.
Good afternoon, Michael. My question is relating to point 4.3 on page 15. You've talked about the transport statement that's been submitted to support the development proposals. It does say that it does not include a capacity assessment of the access. Why hasn't that been done is my first question. And if it hasn't been done, how can anybody possibly draw the conclusion that capacity is unlikely to be an issue on this development? Thank you.
I'm not a transport planner, but my understanding is that you wouldn't usually have that kind of level of detail for a scheme of this size. Similarly, with the position being that 30 dwellings have been consented on the site, it was looking at an uplift of 20 additional houses. So again, there is a baseline of data that was being used by the consultant in that regard. The County Highways Authority would potentially ask for such information if they considered it required. It did not come up in discussions with them as being a requirement in this case.
You could say it's just an additional 20. I could say it's almost double. Depends which way you're looking at it, I suppose, but thank you for your response.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Foster, member for Colaston. On that last issue, just to bring some clarity on this, and it is, I'm happy to have an answer from Mr. Edgar, but under the adopted local plan, under T2, 7.23, it states, this is the one we follow right now, where a proposed development would generate a significant travel movements, generate significant travel movements or travel impact, the council will require developers to submit a transport assessment showing the impact of their proposals on the existing highway network and setting out the measures to offset any adverse impact, including where appropriate, through the implementation of a travel plan. What that means is that we expect that capacity assessment to be done. That's what it means. And I know you don't specialise yourself, Mr. Edgar, in this, and you may be looking at other issues around this application, but that's what we're working to, and that's what all members here are working to. And it's something I'm going to put to our officers shortly. That's 7.23 under T2. So we expect that. And it's not that county haven't raised an issue, it's that this is what we expect as a planning authority.
May I respond? Sorry, may I respond?
Yes, you certainly may.
Thank you. My understanding is that has been undertaken. A transport statement has been provided. I believe what I was previously being asked about was very specifically a junction assessment. That is a level of detail that we would not usually see of a development of this scale. I appreciate what you're saying, Councillor, and I entirely agree. A transport statement is required and has been provided. Just to be clear. Sorry.
To the chair, Mr. Edgar, it is clear, but like Councillor Potts pointed out, it doesn't include a capacity assessment, and that is the issue that's bothering people here, that's bothering people that object to it, and bothering, I know already, other councillors. That is the issue we're looking at.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Edgar.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next. I'm going to now ask you have the opportunity to put questions to the planning manager and other officers about the application. Again, I would like to keep this part of our proceedings focused on getting clarity about any points that you are not sure of. Once we have done this, we can then have a discussion about the application based on all we have heard and read. For that reason, members, I would be grateful if you could not move any motions at this stage. Let's wait until we've all had a chance to make our assessments, and to ensure that this happens and avoid any confusion, I've once again asked the clerk to highlight this point if anyone indicates that they wish to move a motion. Before I have said that would happen, and be prepared to take them. The same rules apply. Please mute your mics unless you wish to speak. Alan, if you'd like to take us through this.
It doesn't appear as if there's any questions for the officers. Is that right, members?
Oh yes, I've got Councillor Armitage, Councillor Shipman, and Councillor Barry. We'll start with Councillor Barry.
Yeah, Adrian, under 4.3, where it talks about the transport statement being submitted, it relates to two-way trips during the morning and the evening. How have we come to that, seeing as the application is first and foremost for 50 houses? The size of these houses, I would say you've got children going to school, so there's going to be, I would have thought, more than the 30 that is on this statement. And also, in our local plan, am I right in saying that we have approved 30 houses in the local plan, and the fact that the local plan is due to be adopted any time should be paid significant notice of?
Chair, just on those 2 points, in terms of the 32-way trips, that's what the submitted transport statement has set out as their assessment, Chair, and members will note at paragraph 4.3 that the Highway Authority is satisfied by that assessment in this case in making its recommendation. And just to come back to the point that Councillor Foster's just made in terms of the paragraph 7.23 of your extant local plan, you've heard Mr. Edgar's advice on that particular element, and I'm minded to agree with him in that the paragraph requires a transport assessment to be done, and that has been submitted to us and assessed by the Highway Authority. Just in terms of the 30 houses in the publication draft local plan, Chair, the wording is that it would be appropriate for approximately 30 dwellings, and that doesn't, even if the local plan were to say 30 dwellings, it wouldn't stop members accepting a higher number if that was deemed appropriate, taking into account all matters. So the fact it's in excess of 30 as a number set out approximately in your publication draft local plan doesn't, in the view of officers, stop you considering and accepting a higher number of dwellings on this site if you believe it's acceptable.
Thank you. Councillor Shipman?
Thank you, Chair. Who's the officer? Adrian, are you answering the questions on this one?
Be myself and Phil, Chair, if
Right, yeah.
to try and advise members.
The question was more around, you know, this allocation for the sum in lieu of the affordable housing. Are we saying that this amount of money that we're being offered in lieu would build us 3 houses elsewhere in the district? Or what will this money be used on? So I'm a bit conscious that when applications come in, the affordable housing numbers seem to get lower and lower, and there seems to be other ways how they're wriggling out of not providing them. So I'm just wondering, is this money going to build more affordable houses, or where's it going? How have you come up with this figure?
I can answer that. The figures is provided by our housing strategy officers. So there's providing the 7 units on site, and then they're providing the additional monies towards 3 units to be provided off site. So it would make a total contribution of 20%, which is a mix of on and off site. So they are providing the 20% affordable.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, it's a question to Adrian. There's been, I remember last time, great emphasis was put on the fact that it was the site was located within a hazardous installation zone, and it was it's indicated on the draft local plan. And could you tell us that what these chemicals are that are supposed to be emitted? Because I remember at the time they were mentioned, and I did some background research as to what these chemicals were. And quite frankly, the information which I received was quite frightening, in the fact that some of them, they didn't even know what they would smell like, because if you took a whiff of them, you would be dead. And that's the sort of hazardous chemicals that are on this site. Now, you mentioned that there is a portion of the northern part of this site is within, perhaps is in this zone. Could you point out where exactly it is in relation to the houses? Now, I've seen the plan, and it just shows the thing, but it doesn't show how many houses are there within this site. And you also mentioned which chemicals there were last time, but we've had nothing back that way. And yesterday, when you were going through, you said the HSA had cleared it and there wasn't a problem there with it. So could you please explain?
I can come in there if you want aid. Councillor Armitage, it's referred to at paragraph 7.36 in the report, where the and 7.37, where the health and safety executive have confirmed that the site doesn't lie within the zone, so there was no requirement for them to provide a consultation comment.
Just in addition to that, Chair, just to point out that again, you heard Mr. Edgar earlier on consider the issue of the consultation zones, and he was absolutely right that when the previous application was being considered for the 30, there was a different consultation zone area which only permitted the 30 houses on this site within that zone. Following determination of that application, the HSE have revised their consultation zones, and they're shown on the plan at the top of page 12 in the papers, Chair. And just to be clear, that the dwellings now proposed on this site don't fall within that area. And so, as Phil has just advised you, there's no need for the HSE to provide any comment or provide any advice on this, because it falls outside those consultation zones.
Yes, but this is all very well, but it's dependent on the prevailing winds. Now, I understand that at this chemical site, there is a windsock. Now, why do they have a windsock there? I remember that it was noted last time about this windsock. So these chemicals gaseous at ambient normal temperatures. So it's just a question of which way the wind's blowing, whether or not this site, this actual plan will be just defunct. Would you agree?
I just, if I may, I just reiterate the comments I made a few minutes ago. The advice we're getting from the proper body on this issue, the HSE, have not raised any objections to the scheme. The site falls outside the consultation zone. The HSE, as Phil has just advised members, I would advise members to be very careful how much weight they place on the issue of the adjoining Veolia site, bearing in mind that all the houses that are proposed lie outside the consultation zones as set out by the HSE, and the HSE, in their comments to us, have not raised any objection to the scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, fair enough.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Question for either Mr. Kirk and Mr. Slater, and it's going back to T2 of the adopted extent local plan, and looking at 7.23 again. I'd like to have my fears and concerns and the concerns of the rest of the community here put to bed on this. When we look at what he does say, as I've already gone through with the consultant, Mr. Edgar, it says again, to repeat, where a proposed development would have generate significant travel movements. Now we know this would. There's 50 houses being built here, and we know there's going to be significant travel movements. That's accepted. We then said that the council will require developers to submit a transport assessment. And it says a transport assessment. We then go back to 4 point, a capacity assessment. So we've only got a transport statement stating what he states, those 32-way trips, and an initial comments asked for from county highways for 30 dwellings. That's all we have. What we don't have is what we require under our current local plan is a transport assessment. And that's exactly what people's concerns are in this case. It's about the weight of the traffic, the cumulative effect of the traffic and the impact it's going to have on local amenities, the environment and local road users. And we don't have that assessment. So it's a major concern of mine. So question to either Mr. Kirk or Mr. Slater, how come we haven't asked for a proper transport assessment and yet we've accepted a transport statement without this assessment? That's my concern.
I can try and answer that, Councillor Foster. They've submitted a 36-page transport statement. So in my opinion, a transport statement and a transport assessment are essentially one and the same thing. A 36-page document is a detailed document that we've consulted the Highway Authority on, and they haven't raised any objections to it.
That's a good point. If we can come back, Chair, to Mr. Slater, you're right. A 36-page document, it may well be long, and there might be a lot of paper there, but that was submitted to the county highway, and that's based on 30 dwellings. It's not based on 50 dwellings. That's an important point.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett?
But Chair, could I hear from Mr. Slater on that point?
Oh, yep, sorry.
If I could come back to the council on that, I'll just have a look through the transport statement and see whether it refers to 50 dwellings or 30 dwellings.
Just while Phil's doing that, Chair, the transport statement as set out at paragraph 4.3 talks about generating 30 two-way trips during the morning and evening peak, but subject to Phil's confirmation, Chair, that doesn't necessarily equate with 30 dwellings, but I'm sure Phil will come back in a second.
Chair, if it's possible, I've just got a question for Adrian while Phil's looking for that.
Can I add it to my list then? Because I've got Councillor Liggett in front of you and Councillor Parry.
Apologies.
Thank you. It's a question for Adrian. There is a formula, and if I'm right, I think we're talking 300 vehicle movements in 24 hours.
As we discussed in the site visit yesterday, the rule of thumb that I've always been advised that the Highway Authority would take into account in making their assessment is, as Councillor Liggett said, 6 vehicle movements per property per 24-hour period, of which 15% of those would be in the peak hours. And even if you take that calculation, which is in excess of what Transport statement is setting out, and which the Highway Authority have commented specifically on in this instance, that is during the peak hour, 45 traffic movements during that hour, which, as members will be aware, is equating to less than 1 a minute. So even if that were the case, members need to assess whether that would overload the junction and or bring a serious and adverse impact to highway safety. And certainly as officers, we would take the view, bearing in mind what the County Highway Authority have said, that it wouldn't, even at that level of vehicle movement. You've heard a lot this afternoon about how people are parked and the school pick-up and drop-off times. Yes, they are issues across the district and across the country, but bearing in mind they are limited times of the day. Again, my view would be to advise members not to put overriding weight on those 2 particular small elements of the 24-hour clock.
Chair, if I may, the transport statement is in relation to 50 dwellings, not to 30 dwellings.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Foster? Thank you. Moving on, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, I don't know whether it'd be Adrian or Phil that would answer this one, but I'm still with Councillor Armitage in as much as the 7.36 and about the hazardous area around there. The reason we came to the sum of 30 houses in the previous thing was purely to do with those areas that were marked as being hazardous for housing. As far as I'm aware, there's been no chemical cleanup at all on that site since we passed the last planning application. And if that's the case, what evidence and how have the HSE come to the conclusion that it is now safe to put houses there when, you know, as far as we're aware, there's been no cleaning taken place? And the 7.36 and 7.37 don't actually say how they've come to that conclusion. So I wonder if you could help us on that one.
Chair, I'll start, and Phil's got something to add, I'm sure he will. But the story of the exclusion zones, as Councillor Barry may recall, was that, as I've mentioned earlier on, that when the previous application was considered, the exclusion zones weren't in the location that they are now, and they would permit, or did permit, the HSE to accept up to 30 dwellings on this site. That was the situation then, but subsequently the HSE reviewed their exclusion zones and have redrawn them as per those set out in the officer report and recreated at page 27. And so the site now lies outside those exclusion zones. So the HSE have concluded that there is no adverse impact in terms of their own interests, and that development of a greater number of houses would be appropriate. As far as officers are concerned, we take that advice on its face. We're not chemical engineers or health and safety experts, and we rely on the specific and the expertise of the HSE in addressing that issue, Chair. I hear members' concerns about that, but into the ultimate, Chair, if members were to determine to refuse the application on that grounds, and we were tested on evidence at an appeal, as far as I'm aware, Chair, there is no evidence contrary to what the HSE have set out in their consultation reply to us. And I think we would be devoid of being able to defend that reason unless members are aware of other information that officers weren't aware of in preparing our report, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, then Councillor Foster and Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Elliott, Brampton and Walton Wood. Adrian, it's just a quick question for yourself. We heard Councillor Clough speak about the densification of the project, and I'm just looking at a bullet point. I would assume it's 559, and it refers to the local plan, and asking why, if 40 dwellings were unacceptable on 2.8 hectares back in 14, why are 50 now allowed on a smaller footprint? I wonder if you could just give us a bit of help with that one, please.
Chair, may I ask Councillor Elliott just to remind me of the paragraph that he referred to, please?
I'm on page 23, Adrian, of the paperwork, and it's the 4th bullet point up at the top of the page. It's just about property density. It's just with Councillor Clough bringing up the densification. I just wondered if you could give us a bit of a heads up on that one. Why, if it was unacceptable back in 14 for a lesser amount on a bigger footprint, we're now looking at 50 on a smaller footprint?
Chair, I know Phil's able to advise members on the specific area of the report where that's referred to, but I'm slightly confused, Chair, in that the comment that's made that Councillor Elliott refers to is comment made in representations to the council, and the application in 2014 was for 30 dwelling houses, and I'd need to check exactly why that application was refused, but my recollection was that was based on highway safety grounds, but I will just check that, and if I can ask Phil at the same time, Chair, just to advise members where in the report the element of densification and density is addressed.
Councillor Foster, do you want to come in whilst we're waiting?
Thank you, Chair. Will do. I don't think this will be a hard one. Page 13, right at the top, 2.7. A total of 158 car parking spaces will be provided as part of the scheme, and it looks like we're counting spaces in garages where people park the cars. If people do that. So that's 158 car parking spaces, 43 of which are inside people's garages, which leaves us 115. Out of those 115, are any of those 115 spaces on people's drives? So how many of those are on people's drives? So could we take that number off as well? Do we have those details, please? It'll give us an idea how the estate will look, what the intent is.
Can I just clarify? How do you mean on people's drives? All the parking is on plot parking, so it's either a driveway or a garage.
Is it? Thank you.
Yeah.
So none of that is counted on the road or anything like that outside anybody's in that figure?
No, it's all on plot parking.
Thank you. Appreciated.
Just if I can come back to Councillor Elliott, Chair, if I can refine the 2014 refusal notice. That was refused on 2 grounds, Chair. First ground was that the development of the site didn't provide for the restoration of the Chesterfield Canal, failed to provide links between the canal and the countryside, wouldn't result in any employment provision as per the North East Derbyshire local plan. And secondly, Chair, that it would fail to provide a mix of housing with only a limited opportunity to provide affordable housing, not accommodate the required size, type, tenure and range of housing required. So it wasn't on highway safety grounds, so my apologies there, but it was on those 2 grounds, Chair. So not specifically on the concern perhaps that Councillor Elliott has. And certainly not in terms of the absolute numbers.
Thank you, Adrian. It was just that I read it on one of their bullet points and I just wanted clarification on it, but that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just, again, it's the chemicals. I mean, last time we had a number of chemicals that were in the area, but you decided not to put them. make mention of them. And, you know, he's taking the HSE, what they've said has been okay, but without the actual type of chemicals, we don't even know if they're gaseous at standard temperature and pressure. And, you know, again, it's dependent on the prevailing wind to a lot of these. But anyway, I thought we should have had a detailed list of what were likely to be handled at that site, whether or not the HSE said it's safe or not. We had it this time, and you know, we haven't done it this time.
Well, that would be my error. I've written the report, but essentially the health and safety executive has said there was no requirement for them to be consulted. I'm not a chemist, so a list of chemicals is just going to confuse me writing the report. You know, the health and safety executive are our statutory consultee on these sort of matters, and so when they come back and say there's no requirement for them to be consulted, that really is as much as we can do on the matter.
Well, I would have rather have seen it than I could have checked up what they were, because I have access to be able to find out of somebody who is highly qualified. Anyway, that's that.
Thank you. Councillor Berry next, and then I think we'll wrap it up and move on to our discussion.
Yeah, Adrian, I'm sorry to go on about this chemical thing, and I know Councillor Armitage as well, but I'm really concerned that the last time this came in front of planning, the chemicals were a big issue. Now, I accept the fact that the HSE have changed the boundaries and they're saying it's all right now. But there was all sorts put in place last time, like leaflets being put through houses if the wind was blowing in the wrong direction, and various other bits and bobs that came to light. I find it very strange that those two short paragraphs do not address any of the concerns that we had last time. And because there's been no cleaning of that site, chemical cleaning of that site, I'm really struggling to see how the HSE have come forward to say there isn't a problem there now. Have the HSE given you a more detailed report than what's actually put in here or not? Because if it hasn't, then I think if we were to say that this was part of a reason to refuse, then we'd have to have that information before us.
To check, those comments in the report are pretty much verbatim what the health and safety have said to us.
Chair, I'm in danger of repeating myself here, but and I note the concern expressed by Councillors Armitage and Barry. I'm not seeking to diminish those concerns, Chair, but the situation in 2014 was, and subsequently was a different situation than we are faced as planners now. And in the current situation, on the basis of the current information and in terms of your publication draft local plan, which I agree with Councillor Barry, you should be placing considerable weight on now. The site of the houses lies outside the consultation zone, so it is not surprising to us as your officers, Chair, that the HSE have come back with the comments that they have. It lies outside the consultation zone, so the area wherein they would be concerned about development, and so they're not concerned about advising us that we may grant planning permission on the site. So we aren't able to add any more, Chair. I hear what members say, but the HSE don't have any concerns. And my advice to members would be to be very careful how much weight you place on this issue, bearing in mind the designation in the publication draft local plan and the comments of the HSE.
Thank you. Thank you to the officers for all their responses. Before we move on to our debate, just like to make sure that we're all aware of the regards to motions. I'm going to ask Alan to take us through this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Please bear in mind, members, that a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then that amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against the officer recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving a motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations fails, or in other words, it is not passed, that doesn't mean to say that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or another course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. In terms of the timing of the motions, these should be moved and seconded after the committee has heard, read and discussed the evidence before it. The chair will indicate when this point has been reached and will then invite members to place motions before the committee. Members will be reminded of this by the clerk if they wish to propose a motion before then. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Again, just to remind us all that we can refrain from making any motions until we've concluded any discussions, and I'm going to open the floor. Councillor Armitage.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It seems to me that the only safe option we have here is the fact that it goes against the draft local plan, which proposes only 30 of this site. The question about the highway safety, I mean, the development would add more traffic to a highly populated cul-de-sac, and it exits onto a busy main road and it's close to a school. But having said that, the highway authority seem to go along with it because, as usual, they never look at the cumulative effect of the houses which are already there. And, you know, on that, I think it would be dangerous to use that as a reason. And the only thing that I can see is the fact that it's not in line with the draft local plan, which have proposed only 30. And I'm not in favour of this particular thing because I can't propose a motion just at the moment, can I? Would I be right?
Certainly not.
Right, but I will in a minute.
Councillor Shipman.
Thanks, Chair. I do agree with Councillor Armitage that the allocation increase is, I know 20 houses doesn't sound a lot, but when it's 20 more out of an area that should have had 30 in, you're talking, you know, a significant percentage increase for that area. So I think that's definitely one that it can be refused on. I actually also, it really annoys me that we keep describing these developments as sustainable. In order for it to be sustainable, it needs to have, and it's in here somewhere that we've wrote it down, there's three aspects to it, something like economical, social, and environmental. Well, of course, any development meets the social aspect of it, that's a residential development. But the excuses being given why this is a sustainable one is also what every other development means. Just because you're building houses doesn't mean you're creating jobs in the local area. It's what it means by economical benefits is that the development itself provides jobs once it's built, that itself can then be sustainable and provide employment for people that are living on that estate. Not sustainable just to say you're creating jobs just because you've got some builders in and you may be a local carpenter. That's not what makes it a sustainable development. So I think that that's another area as well that we can oppose this on. And again, I mean, I don't know if this can be confirmed by the planning officers, but what the agent said, in that the assessment that they've created their statement of was done by someone pressing a button on a modeler. Well, that doesn't take in any of the local situation into account. That's just taking some national model that they're applying in different areas depending on different demographics. But that's not what shows a reality of the situation. And I think that really that seriously needs to be included in a reason why we're rejecting it. If it's not, then anybody that's, if it does go to appeal, anybody that's trying to use that as an argument won't be able to use that item when they're trying to argue an appeal. So I think those three, in my opinion, are reasons why I think we should reject this application. I mean, if it come back with 30, then we could have a different conversation. But I think in its current state, I think we're seriously struggling to really approve an increase of whatever it is, nearly 70% on the original one that was approved 5 years ago. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Councillor Barry.
Yeah, I think following on from Councillor Armitage, the fact that this is what we've got in our draft local plan, I think we should be keeping to that. I don't think we should be moving out of it. The other concern is we never seem to have addressed the issue that there is a possible other entrance for this this building estate. And then my other concerns are about it. These are high-class houses and more than likely going to attract people from outside of the area into it. It's not going to necessarily be local people that can afford those houses. So I think all that needs to be taken into consideration. And I think I still stand by the original application for 30 houses. That's a site that could take 30 houses. There's still going to be a transport issue, even with those 30 houses. I think to near enough double it would be wrong. I mean, the transport, it might not be just school times. There's other times during the day. There's people going in and out of work. You know, people work all different hours, and the more people you've got in there, then the more traffic you've got coming in and out. So the fact that A, you've not looked at the other angle of whether we could put another road into it or not, and B, the fact our local plan is due to be adopted any time that specifies 30 houses, I think we need to be sticking with that at least. If we're going to have to pass anything, that should be what goes, nothing else.
Thank you. Does anyone else want any other comment, etc., before I move to Councillor Potts? Councillor Potts?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. For me, this is all about the safety aspect, highway safety. And to be honest, I don't put much weight on the fact that highways haven't put any objections in, because how frequently do they? They just don't. I get the point about the development striving to make efficient use of the land regarding the minimum density, but I don't feel that we can allow that to happen at any cost. The NFPF states that rejection is permissible if the development has an impact on safety, and I believe this certainly does, both from a pedestrian and a vehicle point of view. 158 extra vehicles on a lane like Primrose Lane could have a serious impact on safety. Not to go too much over all ground, but the extra traffic will access and leave the development via Primrose Lane, a lane already congested by resident vehicle and school drop-off and collection. It's only got a partial pavement on one side of the road where cars already park on the pavements, and it feeds onto a busy Sheffield road with its restricted view concerning traffic at the brow of the hill. This is contrary to T2 of the local plan. And I believe, while we're also talking about, Adrian made reference to the fact that the seriousness of the congestion is mainly at school collection and drop-off times. That for me is all the more reason to not be expanding vastly in this way traffic movements along Primrose Lane, when many children actually need to cross that road in the morning and at home time on the return, on the way to school and on the return home. So for me, this is about road safety and pedestrian safety as an access to the site. And to be quite honest with you, I know we've done this already, but it clearly states the transport statement does not include a capacity assessment of the access. And to me, the access is what it's all about, and I would very much like to have seen that assessment within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my concerns are still around the adopted local plan T2, specifically Part B, which states the site is accessible to a road network of adequate standard to accommodate the anticipated traffic generated by development safely and without detriment to the character of the road network. So it's the anticipated traffic generated by the development safely and without detriment. So it's the anticipated thing that bothers me. That's my concern, T2B, the adopted local plan. One other concern I'd like to mention, and perhaps this could be feedback to Red Miles, it's the offer of 106 monies. We've got a figure has been put on it by our parks, which is 47,000 towards, and that's based on 50 houses. So it's a requirement of 47,000 towards a local park. If you look what a local park costs, if you look at what from a district point of view, not from a parish point of view, but from a district point of view, 47,000 buys you nothing at all, buys you zero. For anything from the district, you're looking at something like 90. If you look at something like the proposed one at Thirlmere, you're looking at something like 90,000 to get anything like just for a basic park in an area like this. So I'd like to see if they ever come back for 30 houses again, if they did, I'd like to see something like an offer of around about 90,000 if it was for, so I'd like that minuted, please. That I'd like a higher offer if they came back for a lower amount of houses, something like around 90, 100,000. That would provide something for the area, not 47. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, before members make their resolution, not the resolutions, make their motions, Chair, may I just say a couple of words about what's been said, please?
Yes, certainly.
Just on the various points that have been raised, Chair, the issue about the number of houses has been raised, and I note what's said in the publication draft local plan about 30 dwellings, and the application seeks 50, but irrespective of that, Chair, I think members need to assess what harm would arise from 50 dwellings as opposed to 30, and is that additional 20 dwellings harmful? Just in terms of the sustainable issues that Councillor Shipman mentioned, condition number 3 of the recommendation does allow for some economic benefits from the scheme by seeking to secure some local opportunities within any build phase of the development. But it has generally been accepted by inspectors, Chair, that housing in itself does bring both social and economic benefits to an area, and members do need to weigh that in the planning balance. In terms of the highway issues, Chair, I understand and see that members are very concerned about that aspect of the scheme. But again, it's an issue of what evidence is that members have that would override the evidence that's been put forward by the applicant and assessed by the Highway Authority. In terms of the 106 monies, Chair, just the point that Councillor Foster made, the 106 monies isn't necessarily to provide new facilities, but it's to mitigate the impact of the development itself. And there is a criteria set out in the supplementary planning document which officers and applicants do work towards, and that sets out a number of amount associated with any new dwelling houses. So it would be difficult, in my opinion, to require a greater sum of money from the applicant in this or any other circumstance without evidence to suggest that that's warranted to mitigate the scale of the new development that's proposed. I'm grateful for that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other comment, I'm going to open the floor for a motion to be put forward. Councillor Armitage and then Councillor Shipman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I put the motion forward to go against officer's recommendation for 50 houses. I don't see any point mentioning 30 because it's the plan, it's the application which is on the table. I agree with it. You know, I mean, we can see it goes against the draft local plan, which only said 30 at the time. We could mention T2B of the highways, but I think if it were to go to appeal, they would just point to the fact that the highways issue had been sorted out by the local highways people. And I think the safest route for officers to defend would be that it went against the local plan, which had only proposed 30 houses on this site.
Chairman, I just come back on them. Councillor, other members may make comments, Chair. It's clearly for the council to defend any decision to refuse the application, Chair. And as officers, we seek to do that. Of course, we do when asked to do so. But again, Councillor Armitage mentioned it goes against the draft local plan, which specifies 30 dwellings. But Councillor Armitage, Chair, in my opinion, hasn't set out why the publication draft local plan and the designation of 30 dwellings, as opposed to the 50 that is now proposed, would be harmful. What is the planning harm from that increase from 30 to 50, Chair? And I think the council would need to understand that to be able to defend any reason for refusal on that grounds. Just to identify it doesn't comply with the wording of the plan, Chair, I don't believe would be sufficient.
Well, I think it would be harmful when you consider the road movement, if nothing else. You know, I mean, we had this on the previous application, I remember it well about it, and it would be detrimental to the area. Whether it's sustainable as GS1 is in doubt, and it's development on a greenfield site also. Would that be suitable for you, Adrian?
Ultimately, Chair, it's for members to determine what they wish to determine an application on, Chair, and it's for the planning committee to make that judgment. But if members were minded to follow Councillor Armitage's motion in this instance, Chair, the words I have is that it's against the draft local plan, which specifies 30 dwellings, and it would lead to additional road movements, would be detrimental to the area, and not sustainable development, and development of a greenfield site, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Shipman, I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, will you move in a motion then? That's what
I think Councillor Armitage.
Yes, yeah, and I'll second that. I mean, it's a 70% increase almost, Adrian, in the amount of houses. This is not. We're not just talking, 10%. We're talking 70% increase on what was finally agreed 5 years ago after multiple attempts at trying higher numbers. So there's clearly, it's not just us sat on this committee. It's clearly been an issue that's gone back a while with other members on planning committees. And I think that is a detrimental impact. If you're going to increase any development size by 70%, you're going to have clearly a significant impact on the local area. So I think that's probably the strongest argument. But I do actually think we need to include this highways one, because we always fall into the trap of saying, well, the county have said X, Y, and Z, so we can't possibly improve it. Well, I'll give you Exhibit A, which is the Nevermore Road, 4-lane end roundabout just outside my ward in Winkworth, where the planning department didn't include highways, and only because the inspector turned up on the day in a good mood, decided to include it late as a submission so that people could actually debate it on the day. That actually got canned off the back of an highways issue that were never going to be intended to be in the refusal. So I think that we do need to include that in. Clearly, there's people with views that have been here today and members that highways is an issue. I don't see how you can properly assess something from a computer sat behind a desk in an office. You need to go and count cars over a long period of time to see what the actual impact is, not shoving it through a model. So I do think we need to include T2 and
T2B.
Yeah, and is it ID2?
Is ID2, Chair? Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
In the developing one, it's ID2.
It's ID3, I think, Chair.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. So if we can include ID3 in the developing local plan, SS1, because I don't think it's sustainable whatsoever, and the LC1, And then in the current local plan, the relevant policies are obviously GS1, or is it T2, and is there allocations on this one? But yeah, basically relevant policies in both, please, Adrian. And I'll second Councillor Armitage's motion if he's happy to accept those amendments.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, Chair, would members be setting out 2 reasons for refusal, Chair? First of all, that 50 dwellings is a greater number than set out in the local plan, which specifies 30 dwellings, represents unsustainable form of development and the development of a greenfield site, adversely impacting the character of the area, Chair, as 1. And secondly, that there's an unacceptable impact on the development, severely impacting on highway safety. And then the relevant policies that Councillor Shipman has mentioned that would divide into 2, or are members seeking just to have the 1 reason for refusal, which melds those 2 together? Again, Chair, just seeking clarification.
Adrian, sorry to talk not through the chair, but the highways issue is because the evidence we're being provided with is not adequate enough. That we need to see an in-depth assessment of this area. All we've got at the minute is some model that's being produced from a desk that's been admitted by the agent. So we're trying to make a decision based on someone that sat behind a desk and hasn't actually assessed the junction and the relative impact on the neighbouring highway. I think that needs to be done in order for us to make a decision one way or the other.
Is everyone happy with that?
Chair, apologies to elongate the discussion on this, but just need clarity that are there 1 reason or 2 reasons, Chair, and also just to clarify that Councillor Shipman's mentioned that there's an issue of insufficient information to allow a proper assessment of the application in terms of the highway safety element. If members are minded to accept the recommendation, Chair, my suggestion would be that the final wording of I understand 2 reasons for refusal are finalised by myself in consultation with yourself and the Vice Chair.
That's fine. Should we take a vote on it?
Just before then, Chair, can we just be absolutely clear as to what the motion is? So effectively, it's to reject the officer recommendations to approve the application. So to reject the application, and the grounds essentially are because of the size of the application, 50 dwellings rather than 30. As set out in the draft local plan, and then also concerns about the impact on highway safety. And I think what seems to be emerging from this is members' concerns about it, because I think you feel as if there isn't sufficient evidence or information upon which to actually make a firm decision. So are those the 2 bases for the for the recommendation, and then with any conditions, as Adrian has said, to be actually determined in consultation with the chair.
Councillor Foster?
Yeah, if you can just come in at that point. I don't step on your toes, Councillor Shipman or Councillor Armitage at all on this, but I know we don't have the information we need to be able to give it planning permission. But even with the information we do have, I still think T2B, that it's got to accommodate the anticipated traffic generated by the development safely already. So already the information we've already got is enough to say that the anticipated traffic generated won't be a detriment to the current character of the road network. So it's not just that we don't have the information, what the information we do have as well. If that makes sense, Councillor Shipman, yeah? You follow me on that?
Kinda. I mean, I think the information is wrong. Because I think saying you've got 30, you can have 30 movements, whatever it was, with 50 houses, when the average cars per house is 1.2 or something, doesn't even make sense to me. The numbers don't add up. So I think that a proper assessment's not been done, or someone's just made numbers up behind a desk.
I think the way to deal with that would be to not rely on insufficient information if members are of the view that even if the additional information was submitted, they're unlikely to be convinced about the acceptability of 50 dwellings. I think that seems to be the...
Yeah, but how do we know that? How do we know that until we've seen the evidence, Adrian? It's like we can't make a decision based on some information we don't have already. We'll be predetermining the decision at that point. We need
Just
to see
seeking. Sorry, Councillor Sheen.
No, go on.
No, just saying through you, Chair, just trying to ensure we've got clarity in the reasons that members are voting on, Chair. I'm happy to, obviously, as officers, we're here to implement the decision of members. That's our role. Just trying to be clear in what you would like as a committee, if you're minded to accept the resolution, what you would like in the reason for refusal. And without clarity, it does leave officers sometimes in some difficulty to be sure that we're actually implementing the members' decision. So I'm happy to put in insufficient information if members would like that leaving in. That's absolutely fine. But I'm guided by members, Chair.
I think we need to leave both of those two issues in, because, like I said, we don't want to leave us all short if we've got to find ourselves defending this development if it goes to an appeal. I think there's solid arguments. The fact that we've got information that isn't clear doesn't make mathematical sense to us. And like I say, the allocation is clear as day. It says 30 in the upcoming draft local plan, and this application is for 50. I think residents need to be confident that our plan is a plan for the future and not something we just change on a whim. So I think that these two issues together give us a solid argument to reject this.
Okay, thank you. Are you clear with that, Alan?
Yes, I think, Chair, what's essentially come out of that is that committee, or the motion before the committee, is to reject officer recommendations on the grounds that this would be an unsustainable development, given that it would consist of 50 dwellings rather than 30, as set out in the draft local plan. And that the second strand for this is that the committee reject the application, or propose to reject their application, on the grounds of traffic management and road safety implications, both in terms of the information which is before the committee and concerns about information which is yet to be provided to the committee. Is that the essence of it, members?
Yes.
I'm seeing lots of heads nodding up and down. Let's take a vote on it. Nikki, are you ready?
Thank you, Chair. So we'll do a vote on this by roll call. If members could clearly say for, against, or abstain for the motion to reject. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Barry.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
Abstain.
Councillor Elliott.
Abstain.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Ridgway.
Abstain.
Councillor Rouse. For. Councillor Ruff.
For.
And Councillor Shipman.
For.
So, Chair, that is 9 votes for, 0 against, with 3 abstentions. That motion is carried.
Thank you. I'm going to call for a comfort break now. I see that there's been some requests for this. So if we can reconvene at 10 to 3. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're all refreshed. We'll move on to the second application, which is at Homewood, which is NED/20/00861/FL. So once again, in line with normal practice, I'm going to ask the planning officers about any late comments or reports that have been produced, and for the planning manager to give a brief presentation showing any photos and plans of the site. The meeting facilitator will share the presentation on screen. This means that I might find it difficult to see everybody. Therefore, I will allow the officers to complete their presentation and ask members to reserve any points of order, questions about the process until the end. Thank you. And that's because there'll be plenty of time for any questions, etc. And we'll move on to the second planning application, which is being dealt with by Adrian, I believe.
That's right, Chair, yes.
If you'd like to start your presentation.
As I normally do, Chair, I'll just do a brief introduction, then go through the slides with members. But in this case, Chair, I'd like to refer members in respect of the application at Homewood to the late reps report that was sent out yesterday afternoon. It contains a number of late reps which hopefully assist members. The application in this instance, Chair, seeks consent in full to erect a warehouse building extension to an existing premises on land off Park Road at Homewood. The application site is currently primarily covered in trees and grassland, Chair, with footpaths running along the western site boundary and through the site. It is proposed that the footpath that runs east-west is diverted. Not through this application, Chair, but by other process, but it will be a consideration. It's proposed, Chair, that in this instance, 20 full-time equivalent new jobs will be created as a result of the extension. And it is a 24-hour per day operation that's proposed at Homewood. The site is currently unallocated in your local plan, Chair, but lies within the settlement of Heath Homewood. And previously consent has been granted to use the area for the construction of a car park or a HGV area. The site is bounded on its southern edge by residential units referred to in the report, with industrial units to the north and generally the east and west. The building itself, Chair, will be just over 15 metres in height, which is very approximately twice the size of a domestic dwelling house. An 88 space car parking area will be created to the western boundary, with a 3 metre high landscape bund will be formed to the southern boundary. And generally, Chair, the environmental health officers are requiring a 2 metre high acoustic fence on the top of that, and the condition that's recommended addresses that issue. Whilst unallocated, Chair, the site lies within the second limits of Homewood, so in planning policy terms, there would be no restriction on the site being developed per se, subject to the other considerations. An area of informal open space that's currently treed would be lost to make way for the building. This, of course, needs to be weighed against the other benefits that may arise, and also the formation of the 3 metre high, 10 metre wide landscape bund that would replace some of those trees. Due to its place within and surrounded by other development, the loss of this area of trees is not considered overriding by officers in this case, and the new building is considered on balance to be acceptable. The area of woodland would be lost, and the Wildlife Trust have sought recompense in the form of compensation for this, Chair. The applicant has offered a smaller sum of money than requested, but considers that in conjunction with the retention improvement on site of areas of woodland, the ecological concern is overcome. Officers consider again on balance that is the case, Chair. Neighbouring properties, as always, will be affected by the new development. However, in view of the distances of the properties from the new building and the imposition of conditions that restrict noise, as recommended by the environmental health officers, it's concluded that impact is acceptable. The precise distances, Chair, are set out in the officer report. There aren't considered any other technical issues that result in the application necessarily being refused. So in conclusion, Chair, when weighing the economic benefits the scheme would bring to the area and the mitigation against the environmental impact, officers consider that on balance the development is acceptable, subject to conditions, with the final wording, Chair, delegated to myself to conclude that and the Section 106 agreement as set out in the officer report. And if I could ask Nikki, Chair, just to share the presentation with you. Thanks, Nikki. The first slide, Chair, is showing the application site, and you can see Park Road that runs roughly left to right across the middle top of the screen, industrial areas both sides of that, and the application site, the area hashed in brown, Chair, with the existing premises, the building that is located within the angle of the L at the western side of the site. Residential properties generally, as members can see, to the south and southeast of the site. Thanks, Nikki. This is the current site, Chair, outlined in red. It's currently unoccupied by any building, and we'll see in a second there is a significant amount of scrub and trees that occupy the site. The existing building outlined in blue there on the left top, Chair. Thanks, Nikki. This is the site post any development, Chair, and you can see that the extension stroke warehouse building on the area that's currently treed. There's an area to the east that would be for HGV parking and turning. And the car parking area, you can see is the line of spaces on the left-hand side of the application site. The bund that I've referred to, we'll see a cross-section of that in a second, would run along the west, south and southeast edges of the site. And the small and decreasing in size area to the far east of the site would be retained as an ecological area stroke woodland. Thanks, Nikki. This is just a closer up plan of what's proposed, Chair. The warehouse building at the bottom of the slide, and the car parking area for car vehicles along the west of the slide, Chair. Thank you, Nikki. This just shows the depiction of the building. It's relatively straightforward in terms of its design. If we can just ask you to go on to the next one, Nikki, please. This is the cross section that I've mentioned that's through the building and then through the landscape bund, which is on the left-hand side, the drawing, then the trees that would be planted as part of a landscaping scheme. There's some discussion at site visits yesterday, Chair, about retention of any trees. What I can advise members is that the trees that would be subject of the treatment on the landscaping bund would be new planting as part of the submitted landscaping scheme that would be controlled through the imposition of conditions, Chair. The building itself, as I say, just over 15 metres in height to the apex of the roof. Thanks, Nikki. This is just a photograph, a slide, Chair, that shows the various elements coloured. So the new buildings in the blue, the new hard stood areas in the pink lilac colour, and then the area that would be either retained or formed of new planting. The landscaping bund is the green area. Thanks, Nikki. And just some photographs, Chair, showing the site itself. This is a photograph taken from the Park Road new junction into the car parking area that would be created. You can just see the existing footpath with two people wandering into the distance along the western edge of the site. And you can see this gives a flavour of how the site is currently occupied by trees of various ages. The existing building is just the building you can just make out on the very left top of the slide, Chair. Thanks, Nikki. Swings around from that photograph further along Park Road, and this is the existing property that's used by the applicants and which would be extended to the rear, but this would be retained, this part of the building. Thanks, Nikki. And again, further along the road, which gives a flavour of how Park Road is otherwise developed with other industrial uses along it, both north and south of the road. Thanks, Nikki. This is taken from the head of one of the roads on the south of the site, looking into the site proper. It's beyond the security fence there. It gives, again, a flavour that the site is treed and there is vegetation that is currently occupying it. Thanks, Nikki. This is taken from those dwellings. Dwellings on the left-hand side is clear to members. The site now on the right-hand side, and this is one of the walkways that runs along the site boundary, but again gives a flavour that the site is currently treed with shrubbery, understory, etc. Thanks, Nikki. Again, we've just got a few slides here, Chair, showing the general state of the site. It is subject to a variety of potentially antisocial uses, Chair. But this just again gives a flavour that the site has been allowed to develop, regenerate, whatever word you wish to use, but with understory trees and shrubs. Thanks, Nikki. And again, Chair, this is similarly taken off the site and how it's been regenerating. Thanks, Nikki. And again, the next one, Nikki, please. Oh, that's all the slides, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. We'll move on to the speakers, and I have been asked to change the order in which I've got them here. So I am going to allow that. And the first speaker, which is an objector, is Mark von Goyer.
Hello. Yeah, I'm.
2 minutes when you're ready.
Okay. Hello, I'm Mark, a resident of Homewood. I'm one of many residents who object to the development going ahead as planned. Primarily, I note that the Parish Council objected to the planning application on the 23rd of November 2020, citing concerns on the impact on local residents. 20 written objections have been made by residents, with more not yet recorded. I think they arrived last week, and yet no public consultation has been made. The proposal is highly controversial and undesirable to residents in its current state, where a more modest expansion could have garnered the support of residents and benefited the community as well as the business owners. The council needs all the information to make an informed decision. However, correspondence was still being received by statutory bodies last week, and the report itself contains factual inaccuracies. I specifically refer to the neighbouring housing estate no longer being under construction. Secondly, the plans would involve the removal of mature woodland, which is home to wildlife. Wildlife spotted by residents includes birds, foxes, bats, and butterflies. It is also stated in correspondence from the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust on the 19th of January 2021 that the proposals do not meet national and local policies regarding conservation and biodiversity. The planning report suggests £30,000 of Section 106 to be granted to counteract the loss of wildlife, whereas the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust recommended roughly 3 times that figure. If the plans were downscaled to retain some woodland area, biodiversity would be protected and the net loss of trees would be reduced. The area that creates the border between the homes and the industrial unit have been rated as B quality trees. Thirdly, the size of the planned construction is alarming and will impact visual amenity significantly. A previous application, which was approved on the 26th of Jan 2016, was much smaller and did not move the western public right of way. In the proposed elevations dated on the 10th of March 2021, the building towers over the tree line. This will be a drastic change as the existing cold store is hidden entirely from view by the tree line, as evidenced by photographs. The plans also fail to account for the elevation of the area. The site sits at the bottom of a hill with residential homes on top of the hill overlooking the area, causing the visual impact to be ever more reaching. So please, reject this planning application in its current state. Ask the developer to go back to the drawing board to downscale the plans, address outstanding issues, and make this development work for everybody.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No, thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker, which is Laura Ty.
Hi.
Oh, sorry, one moment. I did have someone waving at me. Councillor Cooper? No? Okay. Laura, 3 minutes, off you go.
Yep. The factories on Park Road, Homewood Adjusted Estate are loud. I can sometimes hear the radio playing and I can tell you what station they're on and what song is playing. From my front door to the boundary fence is 25 feet. I can see trees, bushes and nests, but I can also see the grey outline of Rick Bestwick coastal. I've been in this house 13 years. I am a Rick North tenant and the noise has been consistent and getting louder at autumn and winter due to no leaves on the trees. The noise from the industrial estate is 24 hours, 7 days a week. There is no break from that humming sound. Over the past couple of days, I took decibel readings in the morning, afternoon, and night from 6 feet away from my front door. And every reading I took was above 42 decibels, and sometimes it would reach the maximum of 60.1 decibels. This to me is sound pollution as well as the World Health Organization pollution, as it should not exceed 50 decibels. And if you bring a cold store even closer, it would be even louder than it is now. Can you turn off your freezer off at home? Well, these cold stores cannot be turned off, as they always have goods in them. They have to keep the freezers at a constant temperature of minus 25 degrees C. This is to stop the goods from being spoiled or worse, wasted. This house that I've been in for 13 years, when I had Bricknell come to my house, they said I had subsidence, and that needs to be underpinned on the back garden, 3 meters across by 3 meters down. I still have constant cracks that every time I fill or plaster, they always come back. I can nearly put my finger through the gaps in the bottom of my door. Most of my walls has cracks that I have plastered or filled, but still some cracks come back. I also have 3 cracks that are getting bigger, getting longer at the front of my house, which are concerning me. Both my doors don't look like they fit in the frames anymore. There has to be something wrong to keep getting cracks constantly, and you think building a cold store won't cause any more damage to my house, with all the drilling of metal frames being pushed into the ground? The highway report also raises concerns about vehicles being able to pass through and fly tip the proposed 3 meter wide path.
30 seconds remain.
Fly tipping and vehicle traffic in the area is already a major issue. So to allow a development that potentially gives easier access strikes me as inconsiderate.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you, Laura. The next speaker I have is Nicholas Smith.
Chair, we don't have a Nicholas Smith within the meeting room.
Okay, thank you. The last objector that I have then is the ward member, Councillor Susie Cornwall.
Yes, before I had my 3 minutes start though, I put in another objection and some concerns about due diligence. Due to technical issues, they only got put up on the planning portal at 10 a.m. today. And I was hoping that Adrian actually might be showing those photos, but he hasn't shown them. So before you make a decision, committee, I would really kindly ask that you look at those, as I believe they were in your packs. Is that okay?
That's fine, thank you, Susie.
There's also been an update, so if anybody wants to know about an update, I can offer an update at a later date. So, okay. This application has been rushed through, only being paused by having to come to the committee by myself and Councillor Lee Stone. The emerging plan makes reference to maintaining the quality of life of our communities and minimising noise, disturbance and pollution. This development potentially has all these effects. We wish to reject officers' recommendations and believe that this proposal would have a significant impact on the area. There are 23 objection letters from the community and you have heard them speak, and that's without adequate consultation. As the district councillor, I don't want to speak against opportunities for economic growth, but I find myself on a collision course and I have to give voice to the community. And I'm asking, should this development go ahead, certain conditions are applied, which I will raise at the end. Now, we accept that we live on the doorstep of an industrialist site, and we are proud that we are part of this country's economic growth. And I am delighted that this business is doing well. However, none of these 20 jobs will be filled by local residents. They are all shipped in from Derby. Magna Vale have shown no respect for the community. God knows when they last litter-picked their land. This development was originally a small car park and caught officers unawares, and suddenly it became a 16.4 metre high development that is 8,660 square metres and 30 metres away from residents' property. The original plans show no consideration for the local community and officers got them altered. But what we have before us today is an invasion, disruptive, unsafe and pollutant. For a development of this size to be 30 metres from hundreds of residential properties, it will clearly affect their visual amenity. The constant low-level white noise from such installations could be damaging to the mental health and well-being of neighbouring residents. The building is 16.4 metres high. Where do you think the security lights will be? What protection have the residents got from light pollution? And how much natural light will be lost? And hazardous materials from the gases from the plant room, and clearly increased heavy goods movement, noise and pollution. All of which will have a serious adverse effect on hundreds of residents living so closely to that area. I have to question why anyone thought that this was acceptable. Perhaps they didn't, which is why the public consultation has been so poor.
30 seconds remain.
Have serious concerns about cases of subsidence in the area. I am dealing with 4 cases on Dukes Close. Having discussed this with Ricknold, I have not seen evidence of a thorough report to give me sufficient information that there is definitely no subsidence in the area. So the conditions I would like to ask you to impose. The business operation hours are restricted to account for proximity to the local residential area. Just like
Chair, that's time.
In Temple Normanton. I have a few.
Allow it.
Can carry on?
Yes, please.
Fabulous. If that were the case, it could not operate 24/7. Then would this be a viable proposition for the business? So it could look at becoming a smaller development. The serious consideration that you give serious consideration to reducing the noise, and the safeguarding of residents during construction and after. A thorough review by the Coal Board and by yourself and by Ricknold is taken of the local subsidence issues. That once this smaller development has happened, the owners of the land maintain it and ensure that it is free from litter, because they clearly do not do that at the moment. So thank you very much, committee, for your consideration.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have any questions? Councillor Ridgway?
Yeah, Mike, you talk about the distance between the houses and the development. Is that one of the areas where they would lose all the trees?
Yes.
And do you know how many new trees would be planted? What type and how big would they be?
May I call on my colleague, Mark Bonger, who may know the answer to that exact question because he's been dealing with the environmental element?
I'm sorry, Chair. He's made his address to the committee and has answered questions from members. At this point, he can take no further part in the proceedings.
What's that?
He can't take any further part in the proceedings today, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Councillor Ridgway, it could be a question that you put to the planning officer. They should have.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any, Councillor Barry?
Hi, in the late representations, you refer to the fly tipping.
Yeah.
And that at one point that's always been kept clear of fly tipping because the previous owner did that. Do you know why this current owner has decided not to maintain the upkeep of that area?
I'm afraid I don't know. My husband actually used to work for Rick Bestwick's when it was Rick Bestwick's, and one of his jobs was to maintain that area. And I can assure you, my husband maintained that area absolutely brilliantly. And now when May DeVale, sorry, forgot their name, took over, they have not done that. And if you look at those photographs, that fly tipping is horrendous. It's only going to get worse when the highway is more, with this new proposal of a footpath of 3 metres, vehicles can get through. The fly tipping will continue.
Councillor Cornwall, as your pictures show all this awful subsidence, cracking, etc., has this been ongoing since the properties were first built?
I don't know when the properties were built, This was brought to my attention in November 2020. May I speak about an update since this? Is that allowed? So the main ones that you're looking at are 12.
Just let me check with the clerk.
Yeah.
Chair, the purpose of the questions is really for members to ask for clarification about any points which have actually been made in the 3-minute presentation, rather than to actually open up any new areas of sort of discussion. So I think it's really a case of, is the update related to the specific points that you've made in your representation?
I believe my point will be made that actually the photographs show that that Ricknold are worried. May I speak?
Yes, please do.
So since I made officers aware that I will be bringing this issue of subsidence to this meeting, suddenly there's been a flurry of activity around Duke's Close, where previously there was absolutely none, and Laura can attend to that. Now, the photographs that I've put on that pack, one of them is 12 Duke's Close. I've been dealing with that case since the 12th of November 2020. Ricknold haven't done anything with that, but all of a sudden there's been this flurry of activities, and they have gone round this morning. They went round to Laura's this morning, they went round to 12 Duke's Close, and they went round to 9 Duke's Close. And they have now told 12 Duke's Close, which is one of the main photographs that you're looking at, that it's so bad that they're recommending that she actually vacates that property because they can't solve the problem in the house. That the damage is so bad, which makes me think that there is a serious issue of subsidence in the area. And the Coal Authority report that you've been submitted only talks about your local development, only talks about the site. It doesn't talk about the houses near it. I think there's going to be an increase of subsidence along Duke's Close and Wood Street because of this development.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No, thank you. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Right, we'll move on then. I'll ask the planning officers if there are any questions towards the planning officers.
No, sorry, Chair, we do have one more speaker, Andrew Lawrence.
Oh, I beg your pardon. That's the applicant, isn't it?
Yes, Chair.
Apologies. Mr. Lawrence, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the director of Magnavale. Magnavale is a local employer and has operated in the borough for over 30 years, with the facility in Park Road opening in 1998. Due to a general lack of suitable modern cold store facilities in the UK, the company plays a significant role in the industry and wish to further expand to meet ever-increasing demands for the storage of food and perishable goods. Recent COVID-related impacts and pending uncertainty around the longer-term implications of Brexit have resulted in customers expressing a need for greater storage capacity. This development will ensure that future demand for food can be met. One of the council's strategic aims is to unlock economic growth potential of the area, supporting enterprise, major employment growth, and providing employment locally to enable people to work close to where they live. We currently employ around 150 people, with the majority living locally. The extension of our cold store facility will enable us to meet increased customer demand and in turn create a further 20 full-time positions, which we will advertise locally like we do currently for any new roles. We as a business will recruit locally as and where possible. This development represents a £10 million investment in the Park Road site. Our existing refrigeration plant needs to be replaced, and so we're using this opportunity to replace it with a new plant room, serving our existing cold store facility along with the extension. New technological advances in refrigeration will mean that the new refrigeration equipment that we are using and replacing will be quieter than the currently installed equipment. So we'll see a reduction in noise from the current refrigeration, and also the new refrigeration will also be cleaner and more efficient, contributing to the carbon net goal that Magnavale have. The new extension sits much lower than our residential neighbours to the south. Our neighbours are more than 30 metres away, and we're proposing a 3-metre landscape bund with a 2-metre high acoustic fence along the top. This is to also reduce any visual and noise impact to residents. A noise impact assessment has been prepared to support the application, and the Council's Environmental Health Officer has no technical objection to the proposal, subject to a number of conditions which will comply with before the building is operational. This is all to ensure that residents are protected from any noise. It is well known that the application site is currently used for fly tipping, and public rights of way that cross the site do not feel particularly safe. The proposal provides an opportunity to tidy the site up and divert the path around the perimeter of the site to create a safe and accessible route for pedestrians.
30 seconds remain.
A new access will serve to separate our HGV movements and staff vehicles, which will improve pedestrian safety for staff and visitors. There are no technical objections to the application, and we've offered a sum of £30,000 to enhance biodiversity locally. I trust that you will be able to support your officer's recommendation and support the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Mr. Lawrence, and it has been raised earlier. You speak about planting between the new fencing, etc. Is this mature planting, or is it just small planting?
I don't know, unfortunately, but I will be able to. I believe I can find out whilst I'm here, if I can answer that shortly.
Yes, that'd be very good. Thank you. Councillor Potts, Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lawrence, just a couple of quick questions. First one's for clarity about ownership of the site. Section 4.14 states that the site belongs to DCC, whereas section 7.8 states formerly owned by DCC. So if you could just clarify which of those statements is correct at this moment in time. And my second question is about the 88 space car parking. The report says that the proposal is anticipated to generate approximately 20 new jobs. Can you explain why you need 88 extra spaces for 20 new jobs? Thank you.
In regards to the ownership, I believe it's formerly ownership by the DCC. In regards to the spaces, we would move car parking that is currently at the front of the site to the side area. So it would be using current, so it would increase it by 20, but we also have parking on site for 66 spaces.
Right. So it's not 88 additional, it is,
No.
does include, okay, thank you.
Current parking.
Councillor.
And in regards to the planting, new planting would be as approved by the planting scheme with local authority, retaining existing where we can.
Thank you. Councillor Armitage.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you put in a new fridge plant in. Can you tell me roughly how many decibels this plant is? Because there's been a question about noise. The other thing is the lorries, are they refueled on the road, or do you have diesel storage on site? And let me see, there was the question of I take it's a gas refrigerant that you're using. Are you using one of the green type, which is not toxic?
In regards to your first question, I don't know the decibels myself, but it will be quieter than the current existing plant, and it is in a very similar location to the current plant. So as part of the development, we're replacing the current plant room with a fully new one. And although it will be powering more cold storage spaces, it will be quieter than the current, what we're currently having in place. In the refrigeration gases, it will be an ammonia system with a very, very small amount of ammonia, which is a non-greenhouse gas, which is the current what people want for the refrigeration.
Right, and if I may just another point, there's been question about subsidence in that area. I take it that this building will be on a raft of substantial thickness to alleviate any problems caused by subsidence here. And as a result, would I be correct in saying that this building will not cause subsidence as a result of its design?
Yes, that's it. We shouldn't cause subsidence. It won't cause subsidence.
Right. Thank you. What about the diesel, by the way?
Oh, sorry. No, we don't have any diesel on the store where we're talking about. There won't be any refueling.
Right.
And on the noise assessment in regards to the decibels of the plant room, that's in the planning application. And
Right.
will comply with all proposed conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Mark Foster, member for Corlaston. Afternoon, Mr. Lawrence. It's been mentioned a few times now about the people that are employed. It says that there's 98 full-time staff, 80 agency workers, and you've mentioned 150 people employed yourself, and the number for full-time positions is an extra 20. Something I'm particularly interested in myself is the economic development side of it. We've heard that a lot of workers come in from Derby, and you mentioned a lot of your present workers come from the local area. Could you give me an idea percentage-wise on how many of the 150 come from the local area, please?
I don't, but from my previous experience of working within the warehouse, I would say close to 70 to 80% of our contracted workforce live in the local area. We've also increased our employment away from agency employment and actually increased the permanent quite drastically in the last 3 months as well.
Yeah, and following on from that, thank you for that. Following on from that, the extra 20, will they be agency staff or will they be advertising them as full-time?
They will be full-time positions. We're trying to move away from having agency staff on site and move to full-time positions. As part of the growth that we've seen in the industry, it's enabled us to have more kind of solid full-time contracts rather than any kind of seasonal work, which has meant that we've been able to increase full-time employment.
Excellent, thank you.
Mr. Lawrence, I have one question. It was raised by my colleague, Councillor Potts, but I didn't quite hear the answer. Regarding of ownership, is that DCC still in ownership of the land?
I don't believe it is DCC anymore.
It's owned by your company?
Yes.
The company you're representing. Right, thank you very much.
I believe we bought it from the DCC as land to construct on the development.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Shipman?
Hi, Andrew, you're right. The concern seems to me to be how large this thing is and how close it is to the houses. I was just wondering, does it have to be this big? What's the thinking behind it being this big? Because clearly I think that there probably is some middle ground here that could perhaps be met. But looking at it, I mean, what we're talking, was it 30 meters tall? I mean, that's significant. And you know, twice as big as a house. I don't think you could build a mound big enough and put a fence on top to disguise that from 30, 40 meters away. So I just wondered, does it have to be this big, and why? What's your thinking as a business behind it?
So it's 16 meters high. The gap is 30 meters, 16 rather than 30. And the reason for it being this size is obviously we have to fill the room with cold. The cold store runs at -18. And actually the more product we can put in there, the more efficient it is, the more green it is. Alongside we've actually been able to turn the plant off for longer, because when the room is actually at -18, the actual refrigeration turns itself off. So the ideal is we have the refrigeration turned off as much as possible for electricity usages and for noise. And it all comes down to the building cost versus the cost that we can actually generate from actually the building. Kind of building higher enables us to maximise the storage density in that area. and that is the ability that makes it pay. If we couldn't go that size, I don't think the project would actually be viable, and the employment wouldn't be viable. But also, although it's a 16-metre tall building, we're actually having to dig down into the ground because of the levels. So it will only appear as I think there's a 3-metre island being built along the side. So I know it's still large, but I think it works out with the fencing as well, about a 12-metre, 11-metre high building.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Ridgway?
Yeah, going back to what Councillor Shipman was saying about the size of the development, looking at the plan from what Adrian showed us, it looks as if you're wiping out the whole of the green area and replacing it with just a few trees. And I'm appalled at that. You talk about, 30,000 for biodiversity. That's not going to pay, that's just peanuts. That's a drop in the ocean. I think really, I agree with Councillor Shipman. It needs to be made smaller, and the green areas are gone. And you're getting rid of ancient, old mature trees and hedges and everything.
To the chair, this is supposed to be questions to Mr. Lawrence. It's not supposed to be statements and speeches.
Thank you. So have we actually any more questions? No? Oh, Councillor Armitage?
Yeah, if I could come back to the gentleman. The lorries, when they're waiting to be filled, will their fridge plants be running?
Yes, we can get them to return their fridge plants off. So no, they won't be running. We can request that they're turned off.
Right, because that's been one of the concerns, because some of these petrol diesels on the front make quite a noise, especially when they're getting a bit ancient.
Yeah, we're able to get them to be turned off the refrigeration when they're on site.
Right, so they're turned off and they won't be making a lot of noise on site.
No, and in regards to the mound, I've just had it's 5 meters below, so the mound is actually dug down 5 meters, so the building would only appear to be 11 meters high. And I believe the diesel refrigeration is a
So they'll be electric, will they?
They're all inside the building, so there aren't any external forklifts. They're all of the lorries reverse directly to the building, and all of the forklift trucks are internal and electric.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Barry?
Sorry, could I just say one thing in regards to the trees? We've actually had a tree survey carried out, and most of the trees are actually not mature, and they've been self-seeded and are poor quality trees. So as part of the area that we're looking to develop, they're not mature trees that are in place.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
Yeah, earlier on you were asked about subsidence and could you guarantee that there wouldn't be any, and you said you could guarantee. I'm a bit concerned because when you've just said a few minutes ago that you're going to be drilling quite far down into the ground in order for this building to not be as high as it is, do you not think that if you're sat anywhere near a coal mine or a shaft or something that's down there, that could cause a subsidence? Do you not think that the drilling deep would be an issue?
Sorry, I didn't say drilling. We would dig to the side, so there is a mound where the earth has already been banked up, and we would just further bank the earth and dig into that. So it wouldn't be drilling into it. It's levelling out the site as part of the development.
What about the foundations of the building?
They'd be standard foundations. There is already a cold store built there that we wouldn't cause subsistence with the building development.
Are there any further questions? No. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you.
I'm now going to ask if there's any questions for the officers, planning officers. Okay, Councillor Armitage.
It's a question to Adrian, and we're talking about the trees. I mean, if we were to go with this plan, would there be, could we put a condition on that they were mature trees? And also, if you put them in, if you put shrubs down below as well to mitigate noise, could that be a condition? Because it's all right having a tall, spindly tree, but the noise will just go through. But if you put some shrubs and things which are already there, surely that would help to filter the noise as well.
Chair, the detailed landscaping scheme, planting scheme that accompanies the application does show a variety of tree heights being planted. The highest, there are a number of trees that are 3 meters high, but generally speaking, the area of the wooded areas that are proposed around about 2 meters high. Just to be clear as well, Chair, that the bunding area to the south, southeast and southwest is 3 meters high, and it's conditioned that there would be a 2 meter high acoustic fence on top of there. But in addition to that, as Councillor Armitage has asked, there is understory planting also proposed in the wooded area that would occupy the space beneath the tree canopy at a lower level. That would be planted on the bund. So wouldn't in itself, I don't think, filter any noise, but in association with the bund and the other planting and the acoustic fencing, it is considered by environmental health colleagues that that would present an acceptable environment should consent be granted, along of course with all the other conditions that there's been discussion about. Noise, for example, there are 3 or 4 conditions that address noise. There's a condition that would require the lorries to be switched off when not moving. So they're all contained in the annex to the late comments report, Chair.
Thank you.
And the acoustic fence, I presume that at the moment there isn't one there at all.
Not that I'm aware, Chair, no.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Barry?
Yeah, Adrian, it was referred to earlier on that there hadn't been full consultation. Can you tell me whether that's true or not, and has there been full consultation? And in relation to, we were also informed that there was some information that we've not actually received as a planning committee. Can you confirm yes or no, please?
The consultation, Chair, I believe that 68 neighbouring properties or people have either been consulted or written to, and of course the application has been otherwise advertised as required by ourselves as local planning authority. So from a purely a planning point of view, I'm happy that the application has been adequately consulted on, and you've received a number of representations on the application which would back up that contention, Chair. Whether there is an understanding that there should have been wider consultation from the company with the local community ahead of the application being submitted or subsequent to that, I don't know, Chair, but as far as the planning requirements are concerned, and as local planning authority, we have certain responsibilities. As far as I'm aware, we have addressed those and undertaken those responsibilities and discharged them in full, Chair. Just in terms of information, I'm not actually aware of any information that we have that we wouldn't disclose to members. We wouldn't do that in any case. And in all eventualities, the information we have is publicly available in any case. So as far as I'm aware, again, Chair, there's nothing that we have or we would ever keep from the planning committee knowingly that would mean that you hadn't got information to make your decision. I'd be very disappointed if we did that. We would only do that by error, Chair, and if we did, you'd obviously have my apologies for doing it. We would never keep any information knowingly from members in making the decision that you have before you.
I think, Adrian, what I was trying to relate to is that there was some new information that had come to light. I'm not saying you're withholding anything from us purposefully, but it sounded as if there's some new stuff that might have come to light that, you know, you've not had a chance to get out before this meeting today. That's all.
I'm not aware of anything, Chair. I don't know if Councillor Barry has anything in particular in mind.
No, I'm just going off what was said earlier on in the meeting.
I'm not aware that there's any information that isn't before members this afternoon, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No. Thank you, Adrian. Okay, just to remind you that I'm going to open the floor for debate, and I would ask that you don't make any motions whilst this is in process. Thank you. Anyone would like to open the floor for debate? Councillor Barry?
Yeah, I've got a few concerns around this application, and my biggest one's around subsidence. That building's going to be very, very close to those houses, and whichever amount of manoeuvring you're taking, if you're anywhere near a mine shaft, it could cause further subsistence to the properties in the area. I'm also concerned about the size of this building. It's rather a large building, and as several people have said before, they think it would be better if it was a smaller building. And I feel disappointed that the company haven't done wider consultation with the neighbouring properties and the people that are going to be severely affected by it. So for me, I don't know if I'm right, and then I can't ask Councillor Cornwell anymore about it, but it made it sound to me that there was some information that we hadn't got that was coming to light, and I think I personally would prefer this to be deferred so that we can look at it further and find out what that is, and hopefully know more about the subsidence of the properties as to whether that subsidence has been caused and could be made worse by the development of this building.
Councillor Armitage?
I think actually looking at the question of subsidence is that all these buildings, they're built on a reinforced raft, and so they actually float, and they won't cause any problems with subsidence. The subsidence is already there. The subsidence, I mean, we've said about the problems with the houses, but those the mine shafts were underneath those houses long before this building was put up. And there's also another gold store across the road there, which is, I understood, was one of the biggest in Europe. So I don't think this one's going to make that much difference. I think the actual woodland, well, quite frankly, it looks a mess. It's been used for dumping stuff, and it's got been apparently used for drug users. Well, I wouldn't want to walk through there with a chance of stabbing myself with a hypodermic needle that's been dumped. And I think it's a question that we're going to clear. This area is going to be cleared and made more amenable. The footpaths will be reinstated, and there'll be a fence round so that the fly tipping can't take place. And I think with the number of people that this company is going to take on outweighs anything else. I don't like seeing trees chopped down, but the quality of the trees is there. They look to be all self-set, and the site's just being let go, and it'll be cleaned up and it'll be made more amenable, I'm quite sure. And plus the fact that these extra jobs in an area, well, you know, there are not that many jobs going, and we need to attract companies to the area. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments? Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, for me, I'm actually a bit disappointed with this one, actually. So I would have liked to have seen some innovation on actually the building itself, because given they're wiping out a whole wood, it could have been all sorts of environmental things that they've done with it. It could have literally buried the actual cold store itself, give it a grass roof, anything, try and help mitigate how it looks to the surrounding neighbours. But we seem to have just landed with putting a soil mound and then a fence on top of it, which is, to me, is kind of, you know, it's missed an opportunity to really have put like that area on the map for economic growth in you know, in the green space. But like I say, we just seem to just have a massive building with a fence on top of a mound to try and hide it, which is not even going to do that. So Yeah, I'm just a bit disappointed with the plan itself. Actually, I thought, you know, I would have loved to have seen some innovation here, but we don't seem to have that. But the big things for me are the visuals, noise pollution, and, you know, what is it going to look like 30 foot from someone's house? These are considerations which I'm leaning towards reject at the moment.
Thank you. Any other comments? No. Councillor Foster?
I sympathise with a lot of the comments that I've heard about this, but I've yet to hear anything that goes against, you know, our planning regs, why we can knock this back. I don't see anything. I haven't heard anybody quote anything yet. I've heard the concern about employment, noise, all the things I've got a lot of sympathy for, a lot. I've made the same arguments myself when I've opposed things here before I was on planning and in planning, but here I find it difficult. So those would be my comments. You know, I've not heard anything yet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, we'll move on to the next section then, where we would I would ask for a motion. So I'm just going to ask for Alan to recap.
Okay, Chair. Just to remind members to bear in mind that for a motion must be moved and seconded before a vote is taken. If an amendment to a motion is moved and seconded, then that amendment will be voted on first. If a motion is to be moved which goes against officer recommendations, then the member who has moved the motion must give the reasons for doing so. The reasons for moving now motion against officer recommendations should comprise the relevant planning issues and be supported by the evidence as necessary. If a motion to reject officer recommendations fails, or in other words is not passed, that doesn't mean that the recommendations are automatically approved. Rather, you will need to take a positive decision through a further motion in favour of the recommendations or another course of action. This will need to be approved by the committee through another vote. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a motion on the table? Councillor Armitage and Councillor Barry.
I move that we go with officer's recommendation, but we also take into consideration all the conditions of not having the fridge units running on the lorries, the environmental aspect of this, that it is we use the mature trees, and there's also sufficient in the base as well to do away with the noise. As regards the noise, the operator has said that it's a new fridge unit that's going in, and it will be quieter than the existing one. And this, coupled with the acoustic fence that's going to be there, should alleviate a lot of the problem. If you all remember that the first fridge you used to have made a hell of a lot of noise, and the one you've got now doesn't make half as much noise and doesn't use as much electricity. So that's why I moved to go with officer's recommendation with a number of conditions.
Okay, got Councillor Barry and Councillor Foster that wish to speak.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I would have proposed to defer this application. I think we need more information in relation to the noise side of it. Consultation definitely needs to take place with the residents that are living there, that will be the people that will have to put up with that noise and all the other stuff. The environment, albeit the trees may not be big, massive, mature trees, they're still there. I accept the fly tipping shouldn't be there, but that's down to the company. They should have shifted that already. But my biggest concern is around the noise and pollution level, the size of the building and the subsistence. I'd like to see some more. I know these go on floating things, but there's still a amount of groundwork that needs to be done. And I appreciate defer this until we've got further information.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Armitage's proposal to go with the officer's recommendations. I've got a lot of sympathy from all I've heard today, but I've never heard anybody yet put anything forward apart from the deferment that can support rejecting this. There's nothing there. What we can do is put forward that it's noisy, we're not sure about this, we haven't seen the information yet. This will get passed on appeal. Now, while that's not a reason in itself, you know, there's nothing here for me. I can't see anything. And that's our job here, to look at the proposal and go to the vote, please.
Could I just come back to you, Chair?
Yes.
And that's the number of jobs. You know, there are a lot of people are going to be out of work after this pandemic. And let's say if we can keep 20 off the dole queue, it'll be a move in the right direction. And we're looking at basically 20 jobs or 20 trees. And, you know, we've got to look at the job situation and making these companies successful so that they work and are attracted to this area. And after all, it is an industrial site that they're on.
Chair, can I just come in very briefly? I don't know if I caught all that Councillor Armitage has said in terms of conditions. I heard that he would like adding to the condition about the vehicle engines being switched off. The fridge units, I believe, should also not run while stationary. And I just wonder whether I missed anything else that he said, Chair.
Councillor Armitage.
Yeah, it was to do with the trees. Let's have some trees, big ones, and also shrubs in the bottom to help filter the noise out, and have it all done before they start any work.
It's in terms of the vote, Chair, are members seeking a revised condition that will require taller trees than the 3 metres, but more predominantly 2 metre high trees. So you want taller trees than that, 5 metres high, for example, some 5 metre high trees, for example.
I'm seeing nodding heads over that.
Yes.
So it would be a revised landscaping scheme we would require, Chair, and then its implementation.
Yeah. Anything to cut the noise down.
Okay. Alan, I'm coming back to you now. We've got 2 motions on. Oh, sorry.
No, we've only got the one motion, Chair, as things stand. And there hasn't been anyone, no one's moved an amendment to that motion, so that is the motion as things stand at the moment that you would be voting on. But can I just be clear on that then? So essentially it's to approve the application in line with officer recommendations with appropriate revised conditions, essentially around the operation of the facility in terms of the noise reduction, and then landscaping as well, as specified at the meeting, with the final conditions to be agreed in consultation with yourself by the development manager. Is that it, members?
Councillor Shipman, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was going to say, just on the planting, the landscaping plan, would it not be worthwhile just planting the whole banking up with various trees so it actually creates, so it looks like it's a larger wood than it really is? The whole banking is planted up, so to residents along that banking, you can have, you know, 2-3 metre trees or whatever it can take that can grow into it, so it looks like it's a better quality wood, but really on the other side, clearly it's going to be a car park or whatever.
I believe that is what is.
Sorry, go on.
I think if the condition is all to not necessarily require the planting scheme as submitted, but to have a revised scheme. I think we would need that to accommodate the height of trees that Councillor Armitage is talking about, and we can perhaps seek to secure a denser planting as well, as Councillor Shipman's referred to, Chair.
Yeah, fill it with trees and shrubs, so it looks so they can't even hardly see the building.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got a motion, we've got a seconder. So the motion was put forward by Councillor Armitage, seconded by Councillor Foster. And Nikki, we're going to go to the vote.
Chair, as per the last application, members could clearly say for, against or abstain. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Barry.
Against.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Ridgway.
Against.
Councillor Rouse.
Against.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
And Councillor Shipman.
For.
So, Chair, with 9 votes for, 3 against and 0 abstentions, that motion is carried.
Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the third item on the agenda, which is a TPO order for Wingerworth, trees at Hardwick Wood. Going to ask the officers to give a presentation. Adrian, you're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. Just before we go on to items 7 and 8, just to advise members that in terms of these 2 items, provisional orders, TPOs, tree preservation orders, been made on 2 areas of woodland that before members this afternoon. They are made provisionally initially for 6 months, and it's then for the authority to either confirm the order, either confirm it in a modified form, or alternatively not to confirm the order at all. And that's the action that members are required to perform this afternoon. As officers, we don't have powers delegated to us to confirm or otherwise orders where we've received representations, and in both these cases we have received representations in respect to the TPO. So it's quite a straightforward matter for members to consider: confirmation of the order unmodified, confirmation of the order in a modified form, or non-confirmation, in which case the order would fall after the 6 months. Just moving on to the specifics of item 7, Chair, refer members to the late updates report of yesterday. And in this instance, Chair, the TPO covers a woodland that sits within the generally treed landscape of Hardwick Wood and adjoins other areas of protected trees, which we'll have a look at in a second. The order has been made provisionally on this narrow strip of trees due to concerns about its potential retention and loss. The site, in officers' opinion, does offer amenity value as part of the generally treed landscape of Hardwick Wood, that the owner's requirement to gain access to other woodland holdings they have close by could be accommodated by way of application and securing through formal process the removal of some of the trees. As such, Chair, it's recommended by officers that the TPO is confirmed in its unmodified form. And if I can just ask Nikki if she can move to the slides, please. Thank you, Nikki. The TPO in this instance, Chair, as I say, is a long, thin, basically rectangular shape. And the area that's in discussion this afternoon is that outlined there at the centre of the slide, and it's referred to as W1, i.e. Woodland 1. Thanks, Nikki. You can see that area of woodland at the centre of this slide, and these slides are in your report, I appreciate, Chair, but this slide seeks to show how that area of trees is associated with other areas of protected trees in and around this area, and particularly the area to the east and south of the long, thin strip that our area is already protected as woodland, and an area of trees that it would be associated with. And we have some photos now. Nikki, please. This is, well, the number of photos which show the area of trees that are of interest to members this afternoon. And the thin strip extends from the hedgerow that you can just make out on the left-hand side of this slide, and the fence come hedgerow on the right-hand side. And it's the area directly in front of where this photograph's taken, which is taken from one of the access roads within Hardwick Wood, which gives access to the properties there. And you can see that the trees are generally of a at least semi-mature, if not mature, form. Thanks, Nikki. This is a similar photo. Chair, again, you can see the long, thin strip extending in front of the photographer. Either side are domestic properties which also have trees within them and forms part of that wider landscape feel in an officer opinion. To the right hand side is one of the made or unmade tracks within Hardwick Wood, giving access to the residential properties. Thanks, Nikki. And then you can see these are photographs that have been submitted by one of the owners of the wood, who is due to speak to you this afternoon. And this again shows the nature of the area that is subject to the order. It's between the hedge on the left-hand side and the hedge on the right-hand side. But again, it does exemplify that the trees that are located within the area are of a, certainly in officer's opinion, a mature form. Thanks, Nikki. We do have a variety, Chair. I'll just ask Nikki to skip through these, but they do show the trees that are currently protected by the order between the fence and the hedge. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian. And we have one speaker, which is an objector, and it's an Amanda Holden. Mrs. Holden, are you with us?
I am. I am.
Can't see you, I'm afraid.
Oh, hang on. I'm here. Sorry. Right. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity. So I'm not going to repeat the representations in the report as they can be viewed. Obviously, you've seen the photographs. Would have liked a site visit because there is actually a track down there that would have been like a natural track that has been used many, many years ago. And it's that we're trying to get. That is our only access into the wood. So it would just be the clearing and avoiding clearing any trees. But obviously there may be some to get our access in there because we haven't got the access at the moment. The 20-foot width mentioned in our report has been taken from our deeds and the adjoining neighbours' deeds. But quite honestly, you know, we just require a sympathetic track, wide enough for our vehicles, any maintenance vehicles, and of course emergency vehicles, whilst minimising any reduction. Totally understand the reasoning that trees do provide the amenity. I mean, you know, we've purchased woodland with a TPO already on there, but the track hasn't at the moment, well, it didn't have the TPO. However, there are a few trees that are obstructing the way, and these are on this private track, and a few of them are viewed by the neighbours and ourselves. Most of it is undergrowth that's sort of causing a physical barrier there. We are very supportive of the surrounding community's amenity. You know, we've provided a walkway at the other side of our woodland so that people can continue, you know, the surrounding community can continue to use that going from Middle Road to Bottom Road. Both the woodland and the track are in urgent need of some management, and they could be causing a detriment to wildlife and the environment. My husband's an avid wildlife enthusiast. We're both members of the Wildlife Trust and Woodland Owners Groups. We're strongly aware that there should be a greater amount of wildlife in there. We know how to create that habitat, and we've actually got more precious wildlife on our garden in Clay Cross than is in the woodland, you know, that's quite neglected. It's known that the creation of rides on access routes will open up woodland to sunlight, which allows the flora and fauna to thrive. Fallen trees will create a better habitat for a wider array of wildlife too, whilst enhancing the biodiversity of the woodland.
Seconds remain.
As mentioned, we're more than willing to work alongside professionals and expand our knowledge. We're just aware and concerned that this TPO will render our woodland, our lovely, you know, piece of land, landlocked, and the condition at the moment is quite hazardous. And it's just a way for my husband to go into end his working life really, and his retirement there, and all of us. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions before I open it to the panel. It's got down here that you're the owner of the wood. You own part of the wood because it's multiple ownership, isn't it?
Yeah, we own, where it says the W1, our woodland is down there. However, the track that we're talking about is owned by the neighbours either side. because in Hardwick Wood it's not adopted by the highways. Everybody owns to the middle of the road as a way to preserve the roads, to look after the roads. So it's actually our access, but we don't own that road, that track, should I say. It is the only access to our woodland.
You say it's the only access, but it does state earlier that you actually put a fence and gate and you use the access from Bottom Road.
What we did, there was on Bottom Road, there is an end property, Brooklands, and they were having some work done in their land. They were having some work done. So they allowed us, because they were having a lot of work done near the woodland and we were using the same contractor. They allowed us to let the contract come from their land onto the woodland. So there is no access from Bottom Road. We actually used, or quite kindly, these people that own the land allowed our contract to come over. Obviously, they've since had all this work done and they don't want a contractor going over there any further now. So it isn't access we've used. We've used somebody else's land with their permission.
Okay, that's fine. And my last point is, if I'm correct in this, in 2019, some owners along the track did actually object to any work being carried out down there. And in doing so, they took legal advice, and you were notified of this advice, and it's regarding the rule of perpetuity. And one of the owners has actually said that you have no legal right of access across there. Is that correct?
That is not correct. No, there is actually, what would need to probably happen is, it's a bit of a table tennis game at the moment. Our solicitors, our legal people, from our deeds and everything else, are saying we do have access. We purchased the wood with that being our access. And they, of course, are saying we haven't got access. That would probably need further, I don't know how it goes, but it is a bit of a table tennis game at the moment between our solicitor saying we have got access and their solicitor saying that we haven't got access.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foster, I saw your hand was up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Mark Foster, Councillor for Colaston. Hello, Mrs. Holden.
Hello.
Questions I've got. One is the access lane you're looking for, or the track. Where did the 20-foot come from? Where did that original figure come from?
Right.
And then what would the track be made of? What are you thinking of actually putting down there?
Okay.
What surface? And last one, further onto your own woods that you own, have you got any plans at the minute for any other sort of development at all?
Right. So the 20-foot on our deeds and the surrounding areas, where the track is that we're discussing, it's actually a horseshoe shape around the woodlands, and it was on the deeds, it says intended roads, and it's actually written down as 20 foot wide with borders of 8 foot either side. So that's where the 20 foot originally came from. However, 20 foot is quite a width and a lot wider than getting one vehicle down there, which is, if it meant we could get a vehicle down there, would be absolutely brilliant. Definitely not the 20 foot. What was the other one? Sorry, the 20 foot. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
You're muted, Mark.
Sorry. Yeah.
My apologies. What is it made of, the track? Is it road asphalt, hardcore?
Right. Well, the track, I think people have said probably was used 1960s, so I don't know what was down there. So at the moment, it's just, you can actually vaguely see there was a track, but the road, there isn't anything down there. We would just want something, just a surface, just to casually be able to go up and down with our vehicles. So whatever anybody, to do this, we would obviously ask advice. I mean, we've already been in touch with Anderson Tree Care, so we would ask advice for the most sympathetic, the least disturbing way that we could put a track down. So anything like that, we haven't decided on a track yet, any material for a track yet. So I don't
Okay.
know.
And the last one was, do you have any further plans down there for any sort of
Right.
development at all?
No, I mean, it's basically, you know, we've got 4 grandchildren, another one on the way. They're very tiny. I always worked with early years, so I know how much, you know, they benefit from woodland. My husband, it's a project, really. It's a project for us, a nature project. You know, we've always wanted a woodland. He's always wanted a woodland. Well, they call him blooming Ray Mears or Percy Thrower. You know, he just loves his wildlife, and it would be somewhere we could go to. We only live in Claycross, somewhere we can travel to and spend our time there. There's a stream, beautiful stream running through it, and it's just to enjoy the peace and the nature, you know, and that's the way we want to go. Something for us and the family.
Any other questions? Councillor Elliott? Councillor Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, if you could just indulge me for one moment. If that woodland is actually sort of landlocked, why would you need access with vehicles to it as opposed to going down and enjoying, as you've just said, the peace and tranquility of it?
Because it's to start with, it's quite a long track, and also within Hardwick Wood, like I said before, all the roads are owned by the landowners. So unfortunately, the times that we have tried to park within Hardwick Wood to then walk down to the track, you're constantly told that you're actually trespassing because they do own the roads. It's not, highways. It's unadopted road.
Yeah,
so,
they're all unadopted.
Yeah,
the top, bottom, and middle are unadopted.
Yeah. So actually, wherever you park, and we're quite a way in the wood as well. So we've got a long journey into the wood. You kind of try and park near the wood. You're always parking on somebody's land, and obviously they come out and tell you that you're parking on their land, kind of thing. Then it is quite a long track to then walk down and get down. You know, you've got your rucksacks and everything. So it is limiting what we can do in there, what we want just to go in there and enjoy it, to take things in, to trim areas, you know, even just to take a picnic in, to kind of build a shelter or anything like that. It's limiting that kind of thing, you know, and that's what it's doing. We can't park anywhere to, you know, if we could just get off the wood, off the access and onto our land to be able to park a vehicle, then, you know, that would be great.
And did you know this when you purchased the land, and how long have you had it?
Oh gosh, we've had it a few years now. So when we purchased it, there's 2 lots of land that we've purchased, and both pieces of land. When we purchased them, obviously the first piece we were told that was our access. Yes, they used to do it. They used to use it. The second piece that is right next to it, the gentleman, that's been in his family since 1946. His father owned it, and they used to use it to go for picnics. They knew of somebody that I think used to live, obviously it must have been like a Nissan hut or something on some footings in our land. You know, we've even been told they used to use it. So obviously we knew there'd got to be some work to either create a track, because it was all overgrown, but we didn't realise that there would be such objection. We weren't, you know, we were told that, yeah, that was our access, and we knew that financially we'd got to do some work on that access, but that was part of, you know, buying it. That isn't the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Mo, sorry. Yes, you're on my list.
Thank you. Mrs. Holden, my question is relating to the option that would already be available to you, as in applying to undertake the works as and when necessary on an individual basis, as detailed in section 2.4. Can you just tell us why that option wouldn't work for you, please?
I think it would work. I think it's more of a sort of, the more work I've done and gone into it, I think I've probably read quite a few scaremongering things that once the TPO's on, obviously, you know, it can prevent you doing so many things. And I think it's that sort of thing that's frightened me. It definitely is, it is an option, but it's a bit of a scary option. I mean, at the moment, it's an option that I probably haven't, you know, when you think about it, it needs to be done. I think it's just the restriction. I'm frightened of the restriction and being told that I can't access my land. You know, it's that kind of thing. And just thinking that my land's going to be landlocked. You know, there's quite a few things that I've read into where possibly this has happened, or it's been a bit of a fight. It's just that is the frightening thing.
Ooh, any further questions? Councillor Shipman.
And just kind of what you said earlier, presumably you're letting anybody enjoy your land. Is that?
I would let, no, what it is, it's a track that goes down. The other side, what we've managed to do is fence an area, because, I mean, it was quite a free-for-all. So what we did, we fenced off an area, and then there was, everybody sort of always walked from one road to another in there. So what we did is, where the track was, we made sure we didn't fence over that track. We sort of kept that track so people can still go up and down that track and still carry on with that. So that's what we did there.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you very much, Mrs. Holden.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Now we're going to have questions for Adrian. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Adrian. We've heard the applicant say it's quite a long track. Do you know, and I know there's big trees, small trees, medium-sized trees. I've got all of that, but could you give me a rough approximation of how many trees there are of different sizes? Just roughly, please.
I'm loath to do that. It would just purely and simply be a guess. There are a considerable number of trees within the rectangular area that are of significant size, but any number would be a complete guess. I've not surveyed them to that extent, I'm afraid. I think the photographs do show the area in an appropriate way, though. It's not as if there are just one or two trees within there. They are significant trees, and they all are all along the area that is currently the subject of the order. I'm sorry I can't help further, Chair, but it would be a complete guess, I'm afraid.
I appreciate that. I knew it'd be a difficult question, Mr. Kirkham. Do you know roughly how long this area is? How long this thin rectangle is? I don't know if I've missed that on the documents.
You've not, and again, I've not put those measurements in the detailing. I would have said it's 300 or 400 meters long. It's when I've walked it, it did take a while to get through it. It's very overgrown and brambles as well, which make navigating it difficult. It is quite a significant length. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact details, but I would have said it's getting on for that sort of length.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Adrian? Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, Adrian, do you think it would be, in your opinion, would it be viable to build something down there? Is that, you know, the potential of putting a track into it?
There is absolutely room to put a track in there. It's the impact of that on trees, which I couldn't quantify without knowing the detail. It's certainly wide enough, for example, to get a Land Rover and trailer in. The area is wide, as you would have seen the photographs when scaling it off against the size of the gentleman who was walking down there. It is able to do that. But of course, if you confirm the order, the making of that track would itself either require consent, or the removal of the trees to facilitate access would require consent. But I think, as Councillor Potts was asking Mrs. Holden, if you are to confirm the order, it doesn't necessarily mean that an application can't be submitted and can't be approved. It just needs to go through that process, which does add an element of assessment and uncertainty to what would otherwise probably be actions that could be undertaken without any recourse to the council. It gives the council control over that, but it doesn't negate that. And if the council is minded to refuse an application for works to trees protected by an order, then there is a right of appeal against that. So it's the making of an order doesn't preclude those other actions, but of course it puts in those checks and balances which may not exist at the present time. The other thing that is applicable to this order and the next item that you'll be considering is both our woodland orders, and there is the provision that the Forestry Commission has to agree management proposals for woodland areas that are otherwise protected by tree preservation orders that overrides any formal protection that the council has, although we are consulted on those proposals. If the area of land, and there is a suggestion that maybe for areas only over 3 hectares or more, therefore if it isn't applicable for a Forestry Commission woodland management scheme, there are provisions within the regulations that application can be made to the council for something similar that allows for ongoing management and maintenance on a yearly or more regular basis that can be done without having ongoing applications needing to be submitted. So that is another option that's open to those who own woodlands that are protected by tree preservation orders, preventing the need necessarily to come back every time you want to chop back a twig or a branch, or undertake proper arboricultural management of areas.
Yeah,
sorry, rather a long answer to Councillor Elliott's simple question, Chair.
No, it's a great answer, Adrian. I've worked down there more times than I could shake a stick at, and I like the feel of it because it's still fairly natural and it's not run with all hard surfaces, other than a few small bits. What I'm loath to do is put a huge wide tarmac track down into a wood and all the things that go with it. But yeah, thanks for your answer, Adrian. At least it gives me a bit more insight.
Councillor Barry?
Yeah, Adrian, I've heard talk about the neighbours around and who owns what and what have you. Have they been consulted on this? Do they have the right to put their pennies worth in, or for their comments to be heard? Or is it treated differently because it's trees we're talking about and not a building?
There is no regulation that requires consultation on issues such as this. It's not a planning application you're being asked to consider. But what we have done, as we're required to do, is to consult with all those who own or have an interest in the land and sort any comments from those parties. If we've had comments from them, they are reported to you either in the report or in the late representations. And in those instances where we received them early enough, they were invited to speak. But what we've not done, no, we've not gone out as we would with a planning application and sought comment from potentially other interested parties.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No, thank you, Adrian. I'm going to open the floor for debate. Just a reminder that please no motions until we've all had a say. Does anyone want to open the floor? Councillor Shipman?
This one seems like a no-brainer to me. We've got somebody that's got a bit of land that seems to be safeguarding these trees for the future, and they just need it making it easier so they can access it and maintain it. For me, it's going to have better quality vegetation and trees within it if they're maintained properly. How often do we see trees come in and it's like, well, let's chop them down because they're dead and they're not looked after? There's an application to do exactly the opposite to what we usually see. And for me, I think it needs passing.
Councillor Barry? Councillor Foster.
I think for me, I'm more on the lines of sticking with what officers are saying, but having like a management plan, which is what Adrian alluded to earlier on, in order that the woods are preserved as they are. Like you said, it doesn't stop them from actually applying to do any changes, but it just gives that little bit more protection to the woods themselves. So I think for me, personally, I'd rather stay on that track. I think the officers are going down the right route.
Thank you. Councillor Foster?
Thank you, Chair. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Barry, and I think it's a no-brainer, much like Ross, Councillor Shipman said. I think it's a no-brainer, but the opposite way, we've got 200 yards by 20 foot. That's a lot of trees to me. These trees aren't diseased, they're not dead, and just for access, so you can take a vehicle down here, I'm not inclined to agree that that we should let them be cut down, because once that TPO is off them, you can chop those trees down. We've argued lots and lots here about TPOs previously, and we've even numbered the trees. There's this many trees, how about we cut down that many trees? And I think it was something you were interested, Councillor Shipman, in your area before, and we argued about each particular tree. This one's diseased, this one's not. We replace it with this one or that one or a different type of tree. We went into that detail. Here, we haven't gone into any sort of detail other than it's 20 foot wide and 200 yards long, and it's a lot of trees that aren't, nobody's mentioned diseased or anything. So there's a lot of trees about to be given, we'll give permission for them to be taken down if we don't continue with the preservation order as it stands and as is recommended. So for me, I think it is a no-brainer. There's a lot of trees here. We don't know the number, and they need protecting, and it needs to continue. And lastly, page 82, there's a bit of a nonsense in there about taking emergency vehicles down there. You don't take 18-ton fire engines down a track. It doesn't happen. You know, if there's a fire in the woods, you take beaters. You do not take 18-ton fire engines. So I don't know how that got in, but that's something definitely to be ignored. So for myself, I support, not propose anything, but I support what officers have put forward. No brainer for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I also have to agree with Councillor Barry and Councillor Foster and the officer's recommendation. I know a lot of history regarding Hardwick Wood. This used to be my ward, and the other thing we should look at too here, this wood has the most fantastic wildlife. They've got deers, they've got badgers, they've got foxes. They all come into their gardens. The minute you start ripping this up, that'll all change. So to me, it is a no-brainer. We keep the TPOs. Those woods should remain as they are. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. We'll move to a motion. I believe Councillor Barry has a motion to put forward.
Well, really, it's just to move officers' recommendations and go for what they've stated.
And I'll second that. Is everyone happy with that?
So that's the confirmation then of the provisional tree preservation order. Is that the essence of it, Chair?
Yes. We could also conditionally put in there, if possible, that there is a maintenance contract or section in there.
If I may, Chair, that would, if you vote to confirm the order, then that would come following that from the owner of the wood or the proposer of the management order by way of formal application. So members then get the chance to consider that. It would be similar to an application to do works to trees, as you will have seen and been consulted on many times, but it would, as it is a woodland order, it contain a schedule of ongoing maintenance that you could then consider, and if acceptable, approve, which would then, as I say, negate the need to come back for every minor element of works that may be required on an annual basis. But that wouldn't form part of this resolution, Chair. If you might need to confirm the order, that is a decision in itself, and any subsequent management would come forward as part of an application subsequently.
Thank you. Is everyone happy with that? Okay. Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So, Adrian, are you saying that the applicant would only have to come back once a year with a plan for the following year as to what they're planning to do with the trees? And let's say if they wanted to put a path, put the road in, that would be a separate application to that as well.
believe that is exactly what I'm saying. Yes, if they wanted to take trees out as a one-off, then I think that would form part of an application itself. That would form part probably of a proposal to put an area into there that would allow for a track. Ongoing management and maintenance, I think, would be a separate consideration, which would then allow for ongoing management and maintenance of the wood on an ongoing basis. But that would then not come back every year, but it would allow, for example, annual maintenance that you would expect in any well-managed woodland.
Right, okay, I think I might have been a bit confused, to be honest, then on that one.
I apologise, Chair, if I've confused you, Councillor Shipman.
Okay.
Hopefully that's clear now.
Right. So, Alan, if you'd just like to read the motion. And
Right. Sorry, just in terms of that, Chair, can I just get confirmation as to who's moved and seconded this?
Councillor Barry moved it and I second it.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, as I understand it, the motion is to confirm the tree preservation order along the lines as set out in the report.
Yes, thank you. Right, we'll take a vote on it now. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, members. As per previous votes, if you could clearly indicate for, against, or abstain. Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Barry.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Ridgway.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
For.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
Councillor Shipman.
For.
That's 12 votes for, Chair, unanimously carried.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We can move on to agenda item 8. And again, this is a TPO at Dromfield, trees at Gossamer Lane. I think I've pronounced that right. Apologies if I haven't. And I'm going to ask, Adrian, are you leading on this one as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Gomersall Lane at Dromfield. It's similar in detail to item 7, Chair. But this is a report seeking members' views on whether or not to confirm the provisional TPO 275 made on a wood of trees, this time in Dromfield. These trees, Chair, are constrained by development on all sides, as we'll see in a second, and were originally identified for retention when approval was granted for a small area of housing on the area of land to the west of the wood. Again, we'll see that in a second. In this case, Chair, officers considered the trees do offer amenity value in terms of their visual presence within an otherwise urban landscape, but also in this instance, they offer an element of ecological interest that they support, and as is set out in the representations before members and as set out in the late reps, and particularly in the comments made from the Derbyshire and Badger group and also the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. Concern has been raised, Chair, by various parties that ongoing maintenance and management of the wood may be prejudiced by a TPO. As we've just discussed, Chair, in the report, I've suggested that agreement with the Forestry Commission may allow ongoing management. Actually, it's not actually as clear, because I think that may only reflect on woods of more than 3 hectares in size, as I've said, but that doesn't stop other methods of securing ongoing management. Would avoid the need to come back on recurring occasions for applications and consent to undertake ongoing management, such as trimming back woods that overhang gardens, for example. As such, Chair, again, officers consider that the wood offers important amenity value to the area and recommend that the TPO is confirmed in its unmodified form. Thank you, Chair. I'll just go through the slides if Nikki can. Thanks, Nikki. As you can see, the area of concern here is the area that's in the centre of the slide, W1. And just to the west of there's the small development of Highdale Fold, which was granted consent on the proviso at that time that this area of woodland was retained for its amenity and ecological value. As you can see, the site is surrounded by an otherwise urban environment of residential properties. Thanks, Nikki. This is a few photographs showing the wood and their relationship to the houses nearby. On the right-hand side here, you can see Highdale Fold and the area of housing. Then the trees beyond that are the trees that form this area of woodland, not the beech hedge in the foreground, but the trees behind them that you can then see behind the houses. And there's 2 other photographs along Gummersall Lane taken from where that blue van is parked, looking at the woodland behind the wall there. Thanks, Nikki. And again, and then I think there are a couple of photographs taken from, oh, sorry, next one, Nikki, please, from both sides of Netherdean Road. I think it is Netherdean Close. And just go back one, please, Nikki. You can see the woodland in the middle distance at the end of Netherdean. And then the other one, Nikki, please, if you can go on one. This shows it from the west, looking back towards Hydale Fold. They're the houses in the middle of the slide, the greyer tinged houses. And then again, you can see the woodland behind there that forms the subject of the report. I think that's it, Nikki. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the first speaker for this, and it's the objector and the wood owner, Fraser Allen. Mr. Allen, are you there? Mr. Allen?
Hello. Hiya.
Can't see you, Mr. Allen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see.
1 second.
I can see you now.
Can you see me now?
Yep, you have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Right, thank you. I've received copies from various supporters of the letters from objectors and supporters of the TPO, and I'd just like to comment that firstly, no trees have been felled in the woodland or removed. Some of the trees were topped by a professional tree surgeon the back part of last year. After this was done after they'd been and done a visual inspection beforehand. The trees that I purchased and planted were mature evergreen, Ilex, Neville, Stephen hollies that produced lots of berries last winter for the wildlife. And the laurel bushes that I purchased are planted on the edge of the wood where it meets the end of Netherdean Road, purely to improve the aesthetic look for the neighbouring houses. One of the residents on Netherdean even commented it looked 100 times better. In addition to this, I'm currently purchasing further trees to plant in clear areas of the woodland. I previously stated many times in writing to the council the reason for the purchase was to protect and prevent the woodland from being disturbed and to further protect the wildlife's natural habitat, as I feel this is paramount to everybody. The woodland additionally acts as privacy to mine and many other neighbouring properties. I have no intention of any kind to develop the woodland. I am fully aware of the values of the woodland and the wildlife within it, hence wanting to improve in accordance with good horticultural practice and woodland management. I am actually not objecting to the TPO being placed on the wood. My only objection was the planning department's lack of willingness to consider confirming with a modification. In my opinion, allowing the boundary pruning, especially to neighbouring properties, should not be an issue. Some of the letters the council have received supports this. Should the TPO be enforced without this modification, not only will neighbouring properties have to apply to the council for permission to prune back any trees that they should wish to do so, but also myself as the owner of the woodland, should they require to cut back beyond the boundary in anticipation of them hanging over a few weeks later. Listening to the previous TPO order, I've now been enlightened to the fact that I can now apply for a management and maintenance to obtain one of those, which would actually cover that problem for me by giving me the ability to prune them back if that was agreed. As stated previously, I'm more than willing to work with the council, trees preservation officer, and discuss the woodland and how it best be managed and maintained. One of the letters from a neighbour on Hydale Fold state I work in construction.
30 seconds remain.
Thank you. I do work in construction, but I'm not a principal contractor and I'm not in the house building sector. There's some kind of absurd amount of belief that it's my intention to develop the woodland, especially from a gentleman living on Netherdean Road who requested the TPO in the first place. Again, I have no intention of developing the woodland. I feel some would rather comment and complain to the council to try and achieve the prevention of something that's not going to exist, the development of the woodland. Their time and effort would be far more beneficial to the woodlands and its wildlife if they channeled it into
time, Chair.
instead of inadvertently being the ones that are possibly causing further deteriorate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for running over.
Are there any questions for Mr. Owen? No? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Owen.
Thank you.
We have one supporter, and that's a Kath Lewis to speak. Hello.
Hi.
You have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Okay.
Can't see you now. You've dropped off completely.
Oh no.
That's okay. We can hear you, so carry on.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm in full agreement with the recommendations of the officer report to confirm the TPO without modification. The trees form a precious isolated green woodland among harsh urban sprawl. Over a dozen different species of trees make up the woodland. The trees and plants within the woodland are bustling with wildlife, and they provide essential habitat for countless insects, birds, mammals, amphibians. We feel privileged living next to the wood, listening to the dawn chorus and roosting calls of the birds, catching the badgers on night cam, seeing the bats go to roost. It's lovely to live there and have the woodland. It's without doubt achieving its purpose of providing a thriving wildlife easement area, and the trees are fundamental in achieving this. Of course, the trees in the woodland need effective management, but the management needs to be in sync and done with sensitivity towards the wildlife. Sadly, the woodland management over recent years has caused me concerns. The trees were pruned in height of nesting season. There's been a summer house built in the wood, and a garden shed's appeared there since. And that was done without planning permission originally. By reading the TPO information, it's clear to me that the TPO legislation promotes good woodland management, which is what's needed, and surely an organised and considered approach from the landowner, working collaboratively with woodland specialists and the local authority, will only enhance the woodland management rather than severely hinder it. In summary, I believe that the trees are worthy of investment and safeguard afforded by the TPO. In fact, it's quite possibly the only means to ensure the longevity of the thriving woodland habitat. Without the TPO, what measure is there to prevent any owner of the land from felling the trees? Not just this owner. We need to preserve the longevity of the wood. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No, thank you very much. Okay, are there any questions for the planning officer? Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. I'm looking at the long list. I've got hosts. Are there any more speakers? Has Rebecca
Robust has sort of had to pull out, Chair. She's unable to attend the meeting, but her speaking text, that happened very shortly before the meeting started, but her text is in the document pack which members have received.
Okay, thank you. So moving on then, are there any, Councillor Foster?
Yeah, question for officers, Mr. Kirkham. If you can run me through again what can be done to support the works that the owner of the woods needs to do, where we could confirm the TPO as per recommendations, but satisfy through a management programme the owner's request to be able to trim the woods and the boundary. Could you run me through that again, please?
Certainly, yeah. If my understanding is that the Forestry Commission management scheme only includes woodland of 3 hectares or more, this area of woodland wouldn't be caught by that. The guidance isn't specific, but I think the comments that Mr. Allen's made to me subsequent to the order being made may actually be that is the correct interpretation of the guidance. The alternative of that is that there is provision made out within the regulations and in the planning practice guidance that application, so it needs to be in the form of an application, but that application can be made to the council to set out for a woodland TPO ongoing management and maintenance of that wood. So, for example, in this case, representation has been submitted that those surrounding the woodland are concerned that they can't trim back branches on yearly growth, for example. So Mr. Allen or somebody else could make an application if the order is confirmed to say that every year we will cut back the branches that overhang neighbouring gardens by taking it in a metre from the boundary, for example. And we will also wish to clear out understory of branches or twigs. And I'm not saying this is the way that the application will be formed, but for example, it could say we will clear out every year branches, twigs lower than 2 metres in height up the tree stem, for example, so clear the understory. So it would set out a management programme that would be done then on an annual basis, so that it would avoid the need for every year for Mr. Allen, the owner of the wood, or anyone else to come forward with a new application, go through the new process, and it would allow then ongoing maintenance and management of the wood. That would need to be formed in the form of an application, so it wouldn't just be something that's agreed outside the public process of how applications are considered, and members would have the chance to comment on that as and when it was submitted. But if granted, it would then avoid the need for every time that the owner of the wood or somebody who had a tree overhanging their boundary wanted to trim back a branch by a couple of inches, in theory had to come into the council for consent for that. So it would take the form of a management and maintenance programme. It would need to be properly set out, but if approved, it would then allow for the proper ongoing management and maintenance of that wood, and that could be contained within an application, avoiding ongoing applications that would otherwise need to be submitted. I do hope that's helpful, Chair, and that explains the situation to members clearly.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Kirkham.
Thank you. Councillor Barry?
Yeah, Adrian, still on the same thing, really. So when one of these applications are made, it could be stipulated that you don't trim trees at a certain time of the year due to the nesting and that sort of thing. Is that the sort of management style that you'd be looking at? As to, you've mentioned about, cutting off lower branches or whatever, but I take it we could put in there about the nesting season and so on and so forth, about the wildlife that's in there.
We could, and we would expect a well set out management plan to be aware of that. You would normally undertake works to trees within the winter months in any case, to avoid undertaking works during the summer months when the tree is growing. That's poor arboricultural management. But of course, anything that is contained within the TPO doesn't take away the law that protects birds, nesting birds and other mammals in any case. It wouldn't override that. But yes, we would expect a management plan to set out works that were done normally between November and the very latest the end of March, when you would normally undertake your management plan, your management works.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Thank you, Adrian. Okay, we can move on to the next bit. I can open it up for debate. Yep, Councillor Barry?
Yeah, I think this particular application, very similar to the previous one, for me, is that we go along with the officer's recommendations, and that it applies for a management plan on an annual basis.
Councillor Foster, then Councillor Ridgway.
Thanks for that, Chair. Yeah, I'm thinking exactly along those lines, that I'm not proposing anything yet, but I would like to, as it's an area I live in myself. So I'd like to be part of the proposing that we take on this TPO. I know from other councillors that represent this area, because two of them have fed their comments on to me about this. And also it's in line with our neighbourhood plan in Dronfield, where we protect, we've got it in there to protect trees. We've also got it, we've also in Dronfield as a town council plant many trees around the different parks and the different areas. Jack,
sorry, Chair, there's clearly something going on. Has everyone?
Councillor Ridgway, it's your own.
Your mic. Yes, that's it, I think, Chair.
Yeah, thanks for that. The town council plant many trees around in the different parks and the different pieces of land we own, and we've also got tree planting projects where we give trees to residents. So we're very much in favour of protecting trees in Dronfield. So I'd be supportive of this, that the TPOs were kept on it, and that we invited a management and maintenance programme from Mr. Allen where he's able to trim and look after his property, his trees on an annual basis. So when it comes to it, I'd like to propose that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ridgway?
Yeah, I was going to go along the same lines as Councillor Barry and Councillor Foster. And I had hoped that it's not just Ronfield that give their residents and look after trees, and that I hope it's everywhere in this area. But yeah, I'll go along with it.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Just as a point of clarity on that, Chair, just a point of explanation for Councillor Ridgway, it is just Dronfield at the minute that gives free trees away. It's something we do as a town council. So it's not something that happens all over the country. We do it here. Oh, I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Shipman?
Yeah, I can't. Are we creating a new TPO here, or are we amending an existing one? Because the packs say we're creating a new one, and Councillor Foster's just said we're changing the existing one. I just want to understand: are we creating a brand new TPO on this land? If so, isn't that separate from the management aspect you were talking about?
The report before members this afternoon, Chair, is seeking members' views on whether to confirm or not the provisional TPO that's been made. If it is confirmed, then if Mr. Allen wished to make application in the form of an ongoing maintenance and management plan, that would form part of a standalone application that would then be considered as per applications are. So there would be public consultation, members would be consulted, parish council consulted, etc., and a decision taken. So there's two processes going on here. First of all, the provisional order has been made, and the decision this afternoon from members is whether or not to confirm that. If it is confirmed, works to trees within the area so protected would need to gain the consent of the council. And in this instance, that could form part of an application that includes an ongoing maintenance and management plan.
So just to so in terms of the last one was to change the TPO that was already on the wood, wasn't it?
Again, with the 272 in Hardwick Wood, that likewise, that was whether members wanted to confirm the provisional order, and the decision has been taken this afternoon to confirm that order unmodified. So that order will be confirmed in line with members' resolution. If in that instance, Mrs. Holden or anyone else who owns that wood wishes to make application to undertake ongoing maintenance and management, they too would have to submit an application. Additionally, you asked the question for the other site, if they wish to provide a track into the wood. If that included development, that would form part of a proper planning application that, if granted, would allow for the removal of any trees that got in the way of that built development, but could include provision for removal of trees to form that track in any case. This is getting a bit more complicated than just the report, Chair, so I hope that's helpful. If there is any further clarification, Chair, I'm happy to provide that. But in the case of the track, that would be development, so that would require planning consent in its own right, probably. But as I'm sure all members know, if permission is granted for development, and that includes the removal of trees otherwise protected, whether that be in a conservation area or by TPO, that development permission allows for the removal of any trees otherwise protected without other consent. So that overrides. So if you've got your back garden's covered in trees protected by an order, and the council grants you consent to build a house there, you can then remove the trees reasonably necessary to build a house.
Right, thank you. I think that's all as clear as mud. Right. Any more questions for Adrian? No, thank you. Okay, I shall open the floor now. Councillor Foster?
Much as I said before, I'd like to go along and propose that we accept officers' recommendations in confirming this TPO, and at the same time inviting Mr. Allen to apply for a management and maintenance programme.
And I'll second that, Chair.
Councillor Powell?
If also, before I continue, I'd perhaps, if Councillor Elliott might allow, perhaps invite Councillor Powell, who's the ward member for that area. Perhaps he'd like to consider being part of this, if Mr. Elliott didn't mind.
It's just a planning committee, Mark. It's not about getting points from your ward, is it?
Let's do it then, Peter. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Councillor Powell, you had your hand up to speak.
I was going to second it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we've had the motion put in by Councillor Foster. It was seconded by Councillor Elliott.
And so the motion there, Chair, is to approve or confirm the provisional TPO along the line set out in the report, so that is unamended. And then our members also asking for a second strand to that, in which actually says that Mr. Allen be urged or sort of informed of his that he could apply for a suitable management order.
Councillor Foster, are you happy with that?
That's fine.
Thank you. Right, can we have a show of hands? Off you go, Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. Can members clearly say for, against, or abstain? Councillor Armitage.
For.
Councillor Barry.
For.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Elliott.
For.
Councillor Foster.
For.
Councillor Liggett.
For.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Ridgway.
For.
Councillor Rouse.
For.
Councillor Ruff.
For.
Councillor Shipman.
For.
Chair, that's 12 votes for, 0 against, 0 abstentions, and is unanimously carried.
Thank you all. Thank you for that. And we move on to agenda item 9, which is the planning appeals lodged and determined. It's another one for you, Adrian.
Not a great deal to raise with members, Chair. There's just been the one decision reported. That was an appeal that's been dismissed, but it is perhaps appropriate to outline the ongoing stream of appeals that we're getting in at the moment, and it does, Chair, causes it takes a lot of resource to administer these appeals, so we're dealing with that at the moment as we go forwards. But members will note there's 4 more appeals that are in the Ashgate property developments. Is an informal hearing that's taking place shortly. The Scout Group at Holmesfield and the Croft Barn at Chesterfield and the Sycamore House at Hemming Green, they're all going. We've just submitted information to the inspectorate on those. And last week we did receive 3 more appeals, Chair, which were reported in due course.
Thank you.
To take any questions, Chair.
Any comment, questions? No. Thank you all very much. It's been a long day, long afternoon, but thank you for your forbearance, and I wish you all good night.
Cheers all, take care.
Yeah, thank you.